streets. Yeah, she's thrilled.
All right, we are back online. Thank you again.
Good. Glad people heard that story.
I think they just missed it.
No, I love
Michael.
those stories.
Lisa, you were going to explain a little bit more about the rising concerns of the veterinary field.
Yeah, it's, last year we saw a 25 to 30% increase in caseload across the board. And we were having to practice in COVID, which was actually quite difficult if you're having pets drop off and you're spending your whole time on the phone and trying to do your caseload. Which meant that the space in our practices changed, but also mainly it's the caseload. And then unfortunately, as much as I don't like saying this, the virtual nature of our communities has also created a situation where people would act as they do on Facebook, which is a little bit of hostile frustration taken out on staff. What we have seen in the last 6 months is an exodus from the profession, both at the nurse level, the assistant level, and the doctor level. So between an increased caseload, having to practice with COVID, we're losing our professionals and at all levels of it. So most of the practices are now to get a neuter for a reason for a cancer. They're put out till the end of August because nobody can do it. And just to get shots can be weeks and weeks. To get an urgent care is almost impossible. Some of the emergency clinics are closing because they don't have the staff, period. It's kind of scary. Our clinic, we're struggling to keep it open as an ER. It's working so far, but there can be 12-hour waits. My sister of mine had a dog almost in status epilepticus, which is a continuous seizure, sat in the Dove Lewis parking lot in Portland, Oregon for 10 hours with people periodically checking on her dog. I had a friend that lost their dog to bloat between ER clinics, and some of the specialty clinics in Seattle are going to day outpatient only as their ERs. They're not taking even a hit by cars. So what I'm seeing and what a lot of veterinarians are seeing, and I used to work for the state association and the national association, I have seen a great deal of concern that the reason we all got into veterinary medicine, which is care of the animals, is going to become very difficult. What do we do with the animals that are super hurt, super sick? I think this is going to 100% impact the shelters because people are going to start getting desperate to get care. And when we started to be concerned about shelters doing medical care, it was when we were actually trying to keep our doors open and the businesses going and everything like that. I think now there's going to be a role, especially for the lower income, because what the result of everything I just explained is going to be is we are going to be raising the prices to pay for everything, because that's what we have to do to keep the lights on and the salaries paid, which means we're going to be cutting out a whole portion of our communities that will never be able to afford us. And that scares me to no end. And that is where I think the shelters will need to step in, and nonprofits will need to step in. So I'm just letting you know that is going on while we're talking about the 5-year plan. And with people leaving the profession, I don't know when this is going to end.
Well, and there was already, on top of people leaving the profession, there was already a shortage to begin with. So sometimes recruitment for, let's say, a shelter veterinarian, because you can't tempt them with percentages in sales and, recruiting with bonuses and stuff like that, it can take upwards to a year, year and a half to even recruit a veterinarian for a shelter, as well as a veterinary technician. So you also have a shortage of people. They can't get them through the schools fast enough. You also couple it with the veterinary field as one of the highest suicide rates as well in the country. So it's a mentally taxing profession, and we're already feeling the repercussions. I can tell you from an operational standpoint, when one of the emergency clinics in town sends you a list of all the days that they will not have a veterinarian on staff. So you can't send somebody in the middle of the night when it's a hit by car and we literally have no place to go except 30 minutes out of town or more. to send somebody.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, and then it's still a 2 or 3 hour wait to get it. So we're already feeling the repercussions. Animals are waiting 3 to 6 weeks for surgeries of any kind, dentals, anything that is a procedure that needs to happen outside of our doors. There is an extreme wait. The only thing we don't have to wait for is spay neuter, because we can make appointments and still send them to be adopted, or they can go up to Northwest Spay Neuter Clinic, or we've even been driving 2.5 hours to NOAA up in Stanwood for spay neuters.
So I do think that that will impact, I think we need to keep that in mind.
Yes, and we should, and I'll definitely document that when we get to the weaknesses and the threats, because it is a huge one. And for the most part, I just wanted to say too, that I forgot to say in the beginning, is my role is to facilitate this meeting and not to necessarily provide content, but it's kind of hard for me sometimes to not comment on some things just because I'm in the field, but but I will not be doing that regularly, but I did want to just say that problem is everywhere in the country, and just wanted to emphasize that it's not
I have
just,
friends in New Jersey and New Mexico.
it's every,
Michigan,
yes, it's everywhere. So
everywhere.
it's a very good point, and we will definitely make sure it gets up here. So it can be addressed, or at least be considered when you're developing your goals and your objectives. So what about the strengths? What are the strengths of the shelter? What are you good at? How do you think you're better than others?
I think one of the strengths is that we've got 4 committed jurisdictions as part of this process.
I think also people pretty much know about animal shelters that are public animal shelters. I mean, they know, at least they do in our county.
They're still confused between the Humane Society and the shelter.
Right,
I take care of the emails for the Humane Society, and we have half the emails I get are do you have any animals for adoption?
oh, really?
And where can I take my animal?
That's another universal problem.
Yeah.
Every city I've worked, yeah, doesn't make it easy, but
No.
yeah. What else? What else are your strengths?
I think we have a community that actually supports this. They have an understanding of the history of where this began and where we are now. I think the community as a whole supports the shelter.
We have a building that's fully paid for.
That is a strength,
They don't
That is a
have-
strength.
They don't have any payments.
except
for repairing it.
Except for the excruciating
Yes.
repair bills.
Yeah,
But
but we don't have a
yes.
mortgage. We're not dealing with
Yeah.
a mortgage.
What else? I know some of you came from other shelters, at least you two worked in other
Yes,
shelters.
I was waiting for some community
Okay.
input from some of our
All right.
commissioners from
Sure.
how they feel.
And I
from the
hope these
community.
pins don't like drive you crazy, because, okay, it's like we're getting
I'm gonna-
intoxicated up here.
I'm gonna put out there and embarrass Sarah. I think we have a committed executive director who's gonna help us.
I think
That's an important.
that goes to the staff as well. I think.
Yeah,
the
oh
staff
yeah,
is-
the whole staff, put the staff on there. Sorry.
He's new.
Andrew's not nearly as committed. Just kidding.
We're just assuming.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
good. Thank you, Doug.
What do you think you do better than, I mean, I don't know how much the rest of you know other communities. I just know these two happen to work in other communities and other shelters, but
I will say our return to owner is phenomenal. We have one of the like higher rates in the country of returning animals back to their owner for dogs. Cats are still better than the national average we're at 5% rather than 3%.
yes, it doesn't take much to be better than that. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I know.
But I mean, we average,
So good.
what are we, 40%?
It's mid-40s.
Yeah,
Yeah, last time I checked there.
and the national average is more like, I wanna say like 25 to 30%, or is it less?
It's back when I had looked at it, it was around that, but the problem with it is the statistics aren't very good, or
I
the
know.
data, so, yeah.
But regardless, even when UC
Yeah.
Davis did our, kind of did one of their reviews of our data when we were going through their capacity for care boot camp, we were on average one of the higher return
Yeah, that
owners
is
in the
definitely.
country. So that is something we do well
Right.
and could also, I mean, even do better. I think we still even have room for improvement on how we handle return to owner, but thankfully, and I think it's not just the staff, but the community helps with that too, with the amount of networking that the community does to reunite lost pets on our behalf.
We have a brand new computer system. I'm sorry, I couldn't. help.
We may have online licensing.
Mhm.
It's still a hope.
It
I haven't licensed
is
online yet. Until I can do it, then we don't have it.
99% there.
And there was one before this, it was community networking for returning, as you said.
I think there's a good supply of foster homes,
Yes.
good connections with the foster organizations around the county.
Yes. And we do have good relationships with other shelters and rescues.
And veterinarians. In general, there's a very good.
Foster, let me go back 1 second. It was the foster, the foster
Organizations,
homes and
homes
the
and individual homes and organizations.
and then the other was good relationships with the other shelters and the vet community.
Very good people.
A contract with JBLM.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
And a contract with Yelp.
All right.
And, yeah, that's right.
We're expanding our municipal coverage.
Other things?
I have a question real quick, just on the side note. Will Yom have a council member represent here since they are?
No, because they're not part of the intergovernmental agreement, because they could not afford the buy-in to be a part of the agreement, plus everybody would have had to vote to have let them in. But we're operating, that was one of the changes in the IGA, because they can't afford to be a part that way, was that we can do other contracts, so we can kind of negotiate as far as like what the community can afford to help with what kind of services.
Any other significant strengths that come to mind?
There's the SOPs are all spelled out and who gets, what kind of care gets taken place and how you track that kind of care. And county has a different set of rules than the cities, but that's known.
But the staff know it
Yeah.
by heart.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's been in place for a while.
Yes.
Oh, this has got stickum. Okay.
Oh, yay.
I was trying to make tape was.
Well, we have a fairly long record of statistics too that we can.
I got 20 years.
That the statistics goes back 20 years, is that what you said?
That's important. Who does that for us?
I haven't gotten them for a couple of months now.
I know. That's because we've been making sure all our data matches as we're moving through the new system. And Andrew's been building all sorts of stuff because he doesn't like some of the.
I'm gonna put this and we can add as we go. So I just wanna, we can add as we go, but I just wanna be sure we get to the, I was gonna stick it over. So we think of other strengths, but what about the weaknesses? This, obviously this is, what are you not good at? And also, I think it's what you're talking about is where can you grow? It's not just necessarily something that's bad. It's something that's lacking possibly.
The stuff we talked about.
The vets, yes.
Yeah. I would say that's medical care first in-house, for sure. We can start there.
I think the facility is lacking in that it needs to be more, well, besides larger, it needs to be more accommodating for the animals.
Still in the earth, yeah.
Yeah,
And that is something, so we also, we just had University of North Carolina did a volunteer analysis of our volunteer program. And one of it, we sent out a survey to the volunteers, which you guys will get to see the results next, not this meeting, but next meeting. And one of the main open comments that they had about ways that we could improve is like every comment after comment was a broken down facility. Was that it was, they loved coming, but the facility itself, you know, they made them sad. It made it difficult for them to work in. You know, it had its own issues as far as volunteering at the facility and also recognizing that the staff and the animals are there. So that was kind of a main theme of a lot of when we opened up comment for them, that was one of the main concerns that had nothing to do with volunteering that they brought up.
So back to Cynthia's point, you said more accommodating for the animals, I believe, and you said it's also about volunteers and staff or the
Yeah,
public.
the public, people.
Yeah, it's in general a number of things, but certainly the animals, but
It's also standard of care.
it's
Well, we're
standard.
doing the best we can with the facility. Or
It's just not amenable to being able to do as much.
Sure.
It's not full coverage in the county.
oh,
Yes.
there you go.
It's not full, the geographical, you mean?
Yeah, the county has a different set of coverage that they negotiated. And I would agree, that is a weakness because it always comes across like we're not doing our
Community
jobs.
perception.
Yeah, when in reality, we're not contracted to do those particular things.
I'm trying to how to figure this out, but we have been running off reserves forever.
Financial?
Yeah, so financial revenue streams, because the jurisdictions are all gonna have to go up, but we need to be finding other ones, so we're kind of, it's a little bit risky there.
And turns into an opportunity, right? Can you start with, yeah,
Yeah.
even without the mask on, I could tell your eyes.
So for me, one of the ones that I kind of identified really early on was our resources and how we handle stray and feral cats.
No community cat program whatsoever.
Mm.
The ones that we have are so overwhelmed.
Yeah, well, but we don't have one, and there's just a few small rescues and nonprofits in the community that do TNR community cat programs, but we do not yet because of resources. And I would also say there might be a couple of municipal codes that inhibit that as well.
So maybe it's codes need updating,
State laws too.
state laws.
The digital accessibility
There you go.
on there. We don't have online licensing still. The website's very dated and aged.
We have been
Hard to find
waiting.
information.
Right where it hurts. But you are correct.
Mhm.
We could be increasing more technology.
Have an app.
I've never
Yeah.
owned a checkbook. Like,
Yeah. digital
That's interesting, that makes me feel very old.
I've never written a check.
It's actually
before.
hers,
What did she, and I'm,
needing an app.
app, oh, okay, gotcha.
There's an app for that.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Dog feeding.
Excuse me.
This will fall, I guess, under medical care, but the lack of a microchip program.
Oh.
We'll give it its own spot.
We don't have that, like.
Well, that's because a veterinarian is required by law to be the one who inserts it here. So we can't just microchip.
Really?
Right, but we can read them.
We
We can read them, right?
Yeah, we can read
Oh,
them,
okay.
but we can't do like low-cost microchip clinics without a vet on site to insert them.
Yeah,
It would be nice to standardize our practice acts
Yeah.
across the country, but we haven't.
Or
Yeah,
if we had a veterinarian on staff, then we would fall under their license. And then we could do more stuff like that because they would be present. But the fact that we don't have a veterinarian on site which again falls under a lot of the medical issues,
Right.
inhibits us from being able to do some community stuff. And that includes the community CAP program, because there are no veterinarians local who will do spay neuter referral cats. That includes like low-cost vaccine clinics, microchip clinics, let alone our own internal medical stuff.
So this may go under the facilities part too, but we don't have the good areas for animals that aren't dogs and cats in my.
I would agree with that. No
I mean,
critter
it's kind of
space.
partly a facility thing, but it's really also thinking broader than cats and dogs.
No,
Sarah, did you not like having a dozen sun conures or whatever in your office?
There were
Is that not-
macaws and conures and an Amazon and a whole bunch. No, that was a long 4
Oh.
months.
We got a, I sort of say a shipment, but it was a confiscation of tarantulas and other things at our shelter.
Oh, geez. Had to
Yeah.
accommodate, but-
I mean, we could also throw in, so like there's critters, like in our feathered friends, so to speak, but also, I mean, we do take in a lot of livestock, upwards of, basically, we don't take cattle, llama, like any of the large hooved animals, but goats, pigs, sheep, chickens, ducks, you name it, we are also responsible for that.
A bunch of sloths too that one time.
Yes, and exotic animals. Wildlife, until we can find a rehabilitation site.
Are you contractually obligated to take those?
There's some municipal codes that may need to be updated so that we're not legally bound to take some of this stuff.
I think for one more weakness, maybe that, yeah, there's both positives and negatives that we're a governmental organization. But I think you could put it under weaknesses in part because there's a number of grant programs that are not available to us because we are governmental as opposed to being a nonprofit.
And you said it's a strength also.
Yeah, I think it's also a strength because cities will, we will pay our, what, I forget the word, the dues or whatever. like-
Taxes?
Yeah, there's a little bit more.
Assessment?
Assessments. There's a little bit more resiliency in light of tumultuous fiscal economic conditions, but at the same time, there's less access for growth revenue than we would have if we were not.
Under a strength, we should put in there good relationships with local law enforcement for animal abuse.
I'm gonna add it just, well, you probably can't see what I'm doing, but we have relationships with vets, rescues, and law
And
enforcement.
it's not just the law enforcement, it's the prosecutors,
Yep, the whole thing.
Yeah.
justice
Okay, the
system.
whole legal
the whole
system.
legal system, yeah.
Because I've heard of horror stories and I've known of one where they don't even talk, so nothing gets prosecuted.
Yeah. Good point.
For weaknesses, we are kind of doing this shift away from overt 100% criminalization response. But I think that is gonna linger for a long time. Like we've sort of created public expectations for having a very high prosecution rate when there could be opportunities for community education in lieu of that. So maybe that's more of an opportunity, I don't know, but I think for weakness, we have an established reputation. If we want to change that, that's hard.
Yes.
Well, and it's not necessarily, overt, like criminalized animal abuse is going, like, we're still going to be,
Right.
humane law enforcement, but I think doing, there's even now a SOAP, just like in veterinary records, there's a SOAP to do, which is like observation, assessment, things like that of the situation to make sure it wasn't unintentional, as sometimes sad as some of these cases can be. People genuinely didn't know, or at this point couldn't get veterinary access in a timely manner.
Yeah, I remember one of my first meetings on JazzCom, there was a comment made that, oh, well, we try to pick people up on Fridays because then they have to spend the weekend in jail. And that is, I think, the exact wrong attitude to have towards
Well,
enforcement.
there, another little side comment, there are communities that still have quotas for picking
Yeah.
up animals, which.
So I would
some of it was in
definitely,
Texas.
I would add in the strengths, because that, brings up a good point, is the way we do run the budget with the assessment based, like the per capita, is a very forward-thinking way that we run our assessments for the jurisdiction, because we're not gonna get paid for the quota of animals that we do or don't bring in, because a lot of the barriers for some other shelters is that they will not get paid. Like, they only get paid for every citation and animal that they bring in. And so it's really hard to say, no, our goal is to keep animals out of the shelter because that's better for them, when in fact, the only way they get paid is to bring them into the shelter. So I do think the way we do that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And opportunities, we kind of semi-shifted here, because I think you made a great point that weaknesses become our opportunities often, so. And in the opportunity side of it is, it's looking at what do you see happening somewhere in the future, or, even would like to see. And I know that I did provide a copy of your vision, mission, and the goals as were defined, so that you're clear on that, because I think it's helpful to look at, what your vision is for this organization, for the shelter, and what do you see as opportunities, or what are things that are possibilities for the future. And they can be big or small. I know somebody mentioned something over there, thought it said, oh, it's small, but I don't know that you should limit yourself, because those small ones could
Here's a big
turn
one.
into something big. Yes?
Because it's part of my oath as a veterinarian and our goals, which is animal welfare. So I'm gonna say opportunity to provide low income medical care. That's gonna go to.
And I would say there's opportunities to improve our revenue through grants and other funding sources.
Keep in mind, though, most animal welfare grants are not yearly funded, they're seed money. And so they won't fund us year over year, so it only grows you for
One thing,
one
yes.
thing for 1 year.
But there's things like maybe fundraiser types of activities and stuff. I wasn't
We
just,
could start soliciting more individual donations.
Yeah.
Opportunities to provide behavioral education for families to avoid abuse, to avoid illnesses, behavioral diseases.
I'm gonna frame it as an opportunity, but I've already been talking with some of the law enforcement agencies, and with the move away from criminalization for the state, local law enforcements are having to reevaluate how they're handling that. And we've already been given the heads up that a lot of basically anything animal related that they would normally be okay with just taking care of might end up moving in our direction. So I'm gonna frame it as an opportunity to reassess how we work with law enforcement on some of these things.
Social justice and equity.
Yes, but also just like the decriminalization, for a lot of things, they're also looking at shifting how they operate as a whole. And so that's something that we'll need to look out for and make sure that we're working with them and supporting them in that fashion as well.
You put under that not just decriminalization, but also social justice, because that's coming. The de-escalation, all that kind of stuff.
We have an opportunity to change codes and legislation.
Yep.
It can affect all this.
To provide evaluation and training for dogs that are on the edge of adoptability. To help them become more adoptable.
And that's just not us, that's across the board. What the pandemic has shown us, what all shelters, so across the United States, an average of 40%, there was a reduction of intake of about 40%. And even intakes were lower. And what we're seeing is that people had the time and the space to actually rehome animals that they couldn't keep. And so we were only getting animals that were, I don't want to say issues, but are like behaviorally and medically unsound and require much more work, both from the staff as well as from a monetary perspective to be able to put them up for adoption. And so that is something to think about in terms of, we don't have a behavior program to work with those animals. That way they would perhaps appear more adoptable, or we work with them so that they don't escalate in some of their negative behaviors while at the shelter, because as we know, a shelter is a really stressful place.
Would this be an opportunity or something that's a goal, a 5-year goal, a new facility? Opportunity to run I don't know where you put that.
I would just add in there to the feasibility of the existing and new.
That's good.
Say that again, so feasibility.
An assessment of the existing facility and then needs for the facility, so.
Whether it's a new one or.
It might be less expensive to rebuild on site,
Well,
repair on site.
so I just got done finishing Kitsap Humane Society last week. And they did instead of a remodel, like they did do some remodeling inside, but basically they've been doing a capital campaign in sections where they add a building and it's seamlessly attached. So outside they almost look like individual buildings, but then inside you seamlessly walk from one to the other, and they've just added. And so their older building has become like the holding facility and the intake, and then like the new building is where all the adoptable animals are and some of the training classes. And then their next capital campaign is they'll be adding a new medical area and a clinic, instead of, completely tearing down and rebuilding or renovating perhaps a building that was never meant to be a shelter. That was another option too. And it was interesting to see how seamless you just went from one to the other. I mean, you could tell in some spots that it was the old building, but the way they did it, it just all blended into one building, and they have about 6 acres as well. So in terms of like the amount of land that they have, it is similar. And animal wise, but pre-pandemic, they took in 6,500 animals versus our 5,000. So even though they are a nonprofit, they are a nonprofit with contracts. So it's not quite apples to apples, but it's not apples to oranges either, as far as that comparison goes.
Yeah. So that may be feasibility of facilities and property.
Has the idea that was floated a couple of years ago about turning JASCOM Animal Services into a nonprofit and put aside, or is there an opportunity
I
to
think that's
to
still
modify things by doing that?
And then the city's contract. Yes, absolutely. For the county and city.
And that opens up grants potentially.
That's still hovering in my brain too.
It comes to the
So
surface
I would
occasionally,
add
it
on
goes
to
back in.
nonprofit, just also add governance structure, so it is broader to do an assessment of that. And I think this goes without saying, when you look at the weakness list, there are many, to Commissioner Parsley's point, there are many weaknesses that should be on the opportunities list as well.
Yeah.
Like I think.
What does the T stand for?
Threats.
Oh,
That's the bad one.
yeah.
Which the threats can also be like,
Yeah, so it's what obstacles?
I
you know,
legit thought that's a
Do
true.
you see and what's changing that can hurt, which you've already brought up a really big one as far as the vet profession,
The economy.
economy.
And
Inflation.
the eviction moratorium ending.
And what,
Inflation.
Oh, yeah, inflation, yes.
I would say that the change in law enforcement rules is also a threat, because we don't exactly know how that's going to affect.
You're a very fast rider.
try to be. The thing is, can you read it later? I'm the only one that really has to read it.
That's
And
right,
I
'cause
will
she's
type
the
it
one
up for
typing it
you.
up, so as long as it's legible to her.
You need to
we're
finish
good.
Law
spelling moratorium.
enforcement changes, yeah, I know, but if I didn't write the
You get
first part,
more
I
out of
forget
there.
what it was. More, it was the lift on the moratorium on the rental, is that what we
Yeah.
were talking about?
Eviction.
Eviction.
moratorium.
Eviction.
For law enforcement, I would also add just the whole criminal justice system as it's going right now with COVID impacts and
We're finally prosecuting cases from 2018.
Does all those bills that they passed about use of force and stuff this year in the legislature, does that cover our animal enforcement officers?
Whoa,
Not sure.
that is,
There's all sorts of tactics in terms of use of force and discharge of weapons that.
well, I can also certainly tell you that currently we only have our pepper spray, I think that they're using.
Pepper spray, and then they will carry a baton, but that's typically for dogs, bite beetles, bite stickers.
It did ban, I think it allows capsicum and then banned chemical types, but.
Yeah, we don't have super chemical types anyway, because they only work on dogs and you can't use them on.
What about the 1310 and the de-escalation training?
That's
Is
what-
that?
That's what I was, yeah.
Yep, and they've had some de-escalation training, but yeah, that stuff starts getting built into us as well.
It's poof gone.
Poof. Well, we won't lose our list, we can always add. We do probably want to pause, we're a little behind because of the pausing earlier and low starts. I want to see if we had scheduled this is Doug specifically, okay, I was asked if we had to give up the first real mini break, but do you all need another break?
Do you want to get through this first and then break?
I think we
Okay.
let's finish.
Close.
Keep our momentum going.
Yeah, well, no, I was thinking we were finished. I just wanted to know if we needed it. I'm gonna get her thoughts, but I just didn't know if we needed to break. Okay, so
So I'm
what
not
was
sure if
yours?
this is a weakness or a threat, but the laws bounding shelters and legislation that's gonna limit some of the things that we are looking at.
Well, and currently too, one of the things that we have to keep an eye on during the rulemaking is for like shelters providing veterinary care. So far, they've listed like shelters, humane societies, but they haven't necessarily listed municipal agencies as being able to provide veterinary care for the public in the rulemaking.
But I think this is also the opportunity, because I think the veterinary profession as the association will be saying, yes, we're willing to partner now, where they were not willing to do that before, partly also because the corporatization is really missing.
I will say one of our threats just from like more of a community, it's community perception sometimes. So even though we, like, and I would say it comes from the terms of euthanasia, like people just assume still, even though the last few months we've been sitting at a like roughly a 90% live release rate. The community still operates under the assumption that, we're euthanizing, that we're killing animals all the time. And I mean, unfortunately, like social media is good and bad, because where they like those same animals that they're networking to find homes for sometimes end up being some of those animals that are extremely problematic, perhaps even unsafe. We cannot from a public safety point, like adopt that animal out, and then it turns into the negative fact after everybody has worked so hard to find that animal's home and, going through that whole process, that then the end result was not a positive one sometimes. And so it gives everybody the overall perception that we're euthanizing more than we do.
Mhm.
I don't think we're through with COVID yet.
Yep, I was just gonna say
Yeah.
the same thing. COVID is still gonna be up there. And I would have you put on opportunities, the partnership with the veterinary profession in a way that we've never been able to do. There's always been a tenuous argument.
Because if we changed the law that allowed assistance to microchip, that it would cut into their revenue.
Well, that used to be the perception, but it was also being driven by a bunch of single doctor practices that you'd be taking that. But now that, 85% of the people or greater that work in the veterinary profession are corporate. And this crunch we're feeling, I think every veterinarian I know is scared that we're gonna have animals falling through the cracks.
I was talking to some veterinarians and their concern was the care for the animals.
Yep.
The business would do okay. They're busy, they're really covered, but they're really concerned about making sure there's animal care.
I think, so that's why I think it's gonna drive it up to the professional association levels, which means they're gonna turn around and partner in ways that are not, I've never seen.
And just another side comment, it's already
Laws gotta
happened.
get changed to.
Happened in
To,
filters.
to actually allow not just microchipping, but needs-based veterinary meds.
Yeah, it's already had, the
Does that have
perception
a
has changed in our
statewide
community already, just because we were concerned with opening our clinic, but it's
Just the
open
national.
arms. They
There's the
appreciate it.
HSUS state
Well,
chapter.
you might find more veterinarians going towards shelters because honestly, I think that's why there's so much, the suicide rate has gotten so high in all levels of our profession is because we're losing that care that people go for.
And I would definitely say a threat would be some burnout too.
Yep,
of
oh,
some-
burnout, yeah,
And compassion fatigue.
because shelters are not gonna be any less impacted by all this.
I think this is also like the animal welfare is a relatively foreign or new concept for state legislators. Like last year, there was the private or
The puppy mill bill.
the puppy mill bill that got like watered down to basically not a
Basically,
lot.
it relates to everybody that's still operating can still operate. We've just prevented any competition from coming in, so they're still the sole money makers.
Yeah, we've kind of created like puppy mill monopolies in
Yeah.
lieu of banning them. So I think like there's probably some education to be done with legislative champions. I don't know what entity would really fill that space.
I participated in that work group before it came to
Yeah.
the legislature.
I did
And
and
Cynthia, I saw you testify a couple times.
But as they were writing the bill, they kept getting pushback to make it weaker and weaker, and then it got amended during it. And
Yeah,
a lot of us are like, this is social justice and the animals, because this is predatory lending, most of these folks do.
yeah.
And so I know the Washington State HSUS director was lobbying for, on our side. And then the Washington Federation of Animal Care and Control Agencies, which I'm a board member of, they have a legislative committee that was lobbying. It's usually headed by Laura Henderson, who's the CEO of Posados, because they have a very strong legislative department at that nonprofit.
And then they got the Department of Commerce involved too because of the predatory lending.
Yep.
But we still couldn't get it beyond.
Even our conservative members of council were supportive because of.
I know, I was so proud of all 3 city councils for banning puppy mills.
And we should go to the county next. Yeah, no, it's, and it may happen organically that way. So we're sidetracking you. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
ma'am.
Okay. Just other threats?
An increase in harder to place animals.
Yeah.
Right, which may result in an increase in.
Which
goes
is
to
also
burnout.
already happening across the state. Several agencies, Tacoma Pierce, Regional Animal Services of King County, and a couple others, just to name a few, have already seen an increase in euthanasia because of this. And in one of our, in several work groups, it's been discussed, so like the transportation of adoptable animals in state work group, where basically we're trying to pull animals from higher euthanasia rate counties into like Tacoma Pierce, Seattle Humane, Spokane Humane are all almost like destination shelters that can pull from across the state. But what they're finding is everything in the state that everybody needs to transfer are behavioral dogs that are extremely hard to place, and nobody has space for those. And so what ends up happening is that these larger organizations are doing massive transports from California and Texas instead of in state.
Is that
I was about to
because,
ask about national pressure on Washington, like, you know, from Mississippi or Texas or.
Yes, but I will tell you, for example, there was a transport from El Paso that fell through of 120 dogs from Texas because they were all scheduled to fly in, and then everybody got so overwhelmed with intakes that nobody could take them. They had to cancel the transport.
So this is a kind of I'm not sure it's a threat exactly, but you know, we talk about opportunities and weaknesses and stuff, but about having digital accessibility and no app. But the problem to me with is that electronics and those kinds of things are constantly changing. So you put something in place and then all of a sudden you have to start all over and stuff. I mean,
yeah, so to that point is the reason why we get animals exhibiting challenging behaviors, because the ones that aren't are being placed on Craigslist by private parties.
It's a mix of things. So yes, so people are taking more ownership because they're home. And so they're placed rehoming their own animals. What I am seeing and what the other shelters are seeing is what we're calling COVID dogs. So a bunch of people went out and got these young dogs, puppies and things like that started COVID. Could not socialize them because they couldn't go out. And so now we have a bunch of adolescent behavior nightmare dogs that they don't know how to deal with. And so we're seeing a large amount of those coming in because they're now biting people or they're too destructive or whatever it is, and they're dumping them because they've dealt with them for as long as they've decided to deal with them. So we're seeing an increase in that type of dog.
Yeah, it's also not from, like, I know there were several New York Times articles and USA Today articles about how like people are just dumping in droves. That's not the case. It's more of what Andrew is saying, like they're just completely under socialized, for lack of a better word, jerks. That, you know, they didn't get to go anywhere, so they only know their house, and so they leave their house and they're scared. They didn't get to interact with any other dogs or other animals besides what was inside their home, so now they can't go to dog parks and play with other dogs. And so, and if you want to talk about the veterinary community being backed up, trainers and behavioralists are as well trying to help people with these issues.
My wife's very busy with that.
Got a
Yes.
thread. A lack of a dedicated revenue stream outside of the jurisdictions.
Yes.
Training.
I got an idea. With the help of a previous legislator,
She goes to people's houses,
who's a veterinarian.
specific problem type, not just sit and stay type training, but it's a specific.
that's great.
Kathy Hayes.
Yeah.
You read Kathy Hayes?
I do.
She gave me a great idea, something she wanted to do but could never get the support, but this might be the right time. And I happen to know a legislator really well who knows dogs, Jessica Bateman.
Oh, that's true. That is true.
She told me she would work with.
Former
Oh, is
commissioner-
that
former
the
commissioner.
tax on fancy toys?
Tax on fancy
Is that
toys
what
and
it is?
fancy diets.
Tax on your machine.
Good idea.
We're gonna raise the tax on that feeder.
And I think we could get the veterinary profession, WSVMA, to back it where they weren't willing to before.
So you guys can look at this, it's pretty.
John guys.
Impressive list. Now it's, what do you do with it, right?
Well, there's a strength that I've thought about a long time ago. I didn't want to break back in, but that has to do with the amount of volunteers. There are a lot of people volunteering to help here.
I was going to say that too, but I wasn't sure if I was correct.
You are correct. We have had, so perhaps it's a strength and a
And the
weakness.
weaknesses.
We have had a lot of people who have retired
Oh,
since
okay.
COVID and are choosing not to come back because of that, and that's okay. You know, so it's really difficult. We haven't been able to open up all opportunities yet because our facility just does not allow for the social distancing needed for a lot of stuff. And we're trying to keep our occupancy at a safe level. But it is a strength. We have a ton of people who want to foster, volunteer, the whole thing. But yes, the weakness is a lot of people have chosen to retire.
Well,
Since
here's the
COVID.
thing, every time I bring up I'm on JASCOM, whether it's my housekeeper or whether it is Monica Damon that works for her, or whatever, they've all volunteered at the shelter. And I'm saying, well, gee, all these people that are disparate in occupation kinds of things have worked there. So they must volunteer and you get quite a few. And you're right, they're probably not doing that right now, but
Yeah, I'm getting emails from the Humane Society that say, where can I volunteer? Can I volunteer for you? And so I send them to Animal Services.
And we've moved all of our volunteer and foster orientations online. More accessibility.
So not everything's not online.
Do we have, talking about accessibility, do we have information for people who do not speak English to come and adopt? And they have that information, especially when it comes to behavioral health animals. Is there, have we reached that communication gap yet?
I think we could improve. We do work on making sure we have translations for all of our like brochures and information and everything like that that we send home. But I will not say that we are perfect in that area, and we probably could have more room for improvement as far as accessibility when it comes to languages that are not English.
well, what about disabilities, of the ability to, for people with disabilities to, is that a weakness or do you have that ability or? That part I don't know, but
I mean, from an adoption standpoint, like that does not stop anybody from adopting.
okay.
I mean, I would tie that into our facilities as far as, you know, being
Able to get in there. Yeah,
I think we have done our best with what we have, but I would still say that it's far from perfect in that regard.
okay,
And not the most accessible of facilities.
right.
Great.
Well, it's kind of maybe a natural pause moment here. Obviously, well, these will be up here. If you think of other things, feel free to add at any time or share, but obviously we'll use this as a reference as we go forward and create the goals and objectives. So do you want to do our official mini break? I think we're kind of combining two here, but sorry, Doug. But obviously you can always get up and, you know, help yourself to whatever when you need to. So don't feel like you need permission.
Just as a reminder, to all of the commissioners, this continues to be an open meeting, so.
Okay.
We can't vote, you mean?
So be careful about what you say.
Is 5 minutes enough or you need 10?
Oh, but
7.5.
7.5, okay. I'm gonna go with that.
The mediator is good work.
I can,
You
Michael, I
you gonna
can,
time it?
and Doug,
I'm
no,
gonna
I
time
can
it.
confirm with you that licensing will be moving forward in the next week now. I just
Really?
finally have gotten my last
Wow.
email confirming that I can do it. No, yeah. We will officially, we will be moving forward in the next week. We're finally good.
Wow.
Michael, I need that technology that you have for OP
What's that?
feeder.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty fun.
I won't share the number because he'll go berserk.
I gotta take mine to work, so I'm lucky.
I know, you're lucky, and yours are well behaved enough that you can. take
Well,
them.
although I have one dog that was going to your shelter, had cancer, and I knew she would get euthanized, so I have her, but she's a year and 3 months out, so. Cause she was a puppy mill mom. And when I diagnosed her with cancer, they're like, well, she can't have any more litters, I don't want her.
Yeah, well, sounds about right.
So when I was testifying this winter, like Cynthia, I was thinking of my own dog and thinking, hoping those just pissed me off.
Yeah, Brian got my son, it wasn't exactly a puppy mill, but it was but then for having lots of babies. I mean, you know, it's some weird thing. And he was so pleased to get it and stuff. And I think the dog was pleased too.
Yep. She's, my dog is so cool. She had never really been indoors. And so she had a house trainer, which I was surprised at her age, how fast she learned to be house trained. And then,
Probably because she was used to being outside.
yep, she didn't know, but she wanted to please so bad that it was easy. Probably within 3 months, she was completely house trained. And then she didn't know what it was like to have a bed. So I got her a bed, and now she loves beds. And I have a couch that has a special material that you can wipe off. One, because I had 5 nieces who spilled all the time, but also because I had dogs, and she now loves the couch. So just these small things we can give her for the last year that she's not had. Walks, she loves walks now.
Well, Larry, Brian's had 3 dogs. Polo died, unfortunately. Really? Some kind of hemorrhagic
Well, and this is.
blood condition that she just died of. It was our favorite dog.
Hemolytic anemia.
Yes.
Yes.
And she just got it from, it was just weird, but and then the dog that he had with her was T-Mon, which is a male, and then Larry is the younger male stray. And he is so grateful for everything. He wants to just be a baby in your arms kind of thing, because he just needs attention. So if you kind of say, should we go for a walk? You can't catch him to put his leash on because he's so happy.
Yeah, let's go. That's how she is. And she, I'm surprised because those are also the recipes for my dog, that they would get separation anxiety, but she's done very well. She does have her moments when I leave for too long, where I guess she goes a little nutty, but in general, she's okay.
Well, Polo, the female that died, she had anxiety things. She would tear up things and try. I mean, I had to go over and kind of make sure. Larry, because he was a stray and was so scared of the people. So when you went in, at first the walkers walked, he just got panicked about dogs and people all the time because of his face. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and because they're like humans when they're puppies, and they have a growth period from about 8. There's a small fear period about between 4 and 6 weeks. If something happens then, it's lifelong. And then there's another fear period between 3 months and 6 months. So if things happen in there, it's traumas that you have to work with your whole life.
Oh, right, and she still has, right.
Are you recovering from the legislative session now, Michael?
I am.
Oh, yeah, just like a human.
I
2 more minutes.
didn't take any leave for like a year and a half, so now I have all this leave to do.
Yeah, I just discovered I'm losing about 50 hours of leave because I haven't used it. I'm over my total.
They gave us the ability to take it, they gave us like another year to use it, but I still have maybe like 100 hours of use it or lose it by the end of the year.
Sir, that's quite the spread, huh?
Well, there was talk about how we wanted to make sure that we had food here because it was going until
All I was saying was well done.
Thank you.
I was impressed too.
This was my like 6:30 in the morning grocery store run.
Although this bag apparently is smarter than I am right now, so.
I did that on purpose. I thought about which stuff you would want to eat. I tried to make it as difficult as possible.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that thought at 6:30 in the morning.
It's very complex thinking before coffee.
Most people like me, if I'm gonna go buy specialized food or treats, I'm gonna go.
We're back.
I'm right there and I'm.
Oh, everybody's here, and I'm sitting here waiting for the timer. You have a minute,
So-
26 seconds.
And you know, you could at the same time.
We're all back.
Okay,
We're
you're
very
right.
punctual- We're a very punctual group.
Nice. Yes, it's very nice. Not my, hasn't been my experience in our field a lot. That is because you.
This is a change.
Kathy always said like the great.
Just wait till a later one.
Yeah.
I'll be in the building.
Well, I'm used to having facilitated sessions that are actually in a facility where people are constantly being interrupted and running off to do
What's your pet
something.
situation?
I do have to go out around noon to move my
Probably
car.
wants a clean.
It's plugged in. They
Oh, I was
want you
gonna
to-
say, there aren't any.
Month-old
they don't want you to, they don't want you
Yeah,
to plug
maybe
in.
not quite
I
a
think there are meters or something.
So I've got it plugged in to recharge. So I
Nice.
have to move.
Maybe more like.
Okay,
We'll try to time it.
3-year-old.
I don't think I'm gonna get ticketed or anything.
You would really.
No one knew it.
You push it and it would be fun to see it happen.
all right, so we are, as Doug pointed out, all back. And ahead of the 7.5 minutes, so I'm very impressed. So part of your papers that I had put in each of your spots are 2 documents. They're kind of worksheets that we can use for this as you would like. But the first one is on the 5-year strategic goals. The second one is on the 1-year objectives. So looking at the 5-year, oops, it break us over. Right, stop. So we obviously want to look at the, excuse me, the 5-year high-level strategic goals. And personally, so I don't trip over. And I'll be, yes, I'm good at tripping over things. Thank you. I suggested, 3 to 5, but I don't think you wanted, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't do more, but I think it just gets hard if you really want to focus on some high level significant things. I certainly wouldn't do more than 5, and, even trying to stay maybe with 3 would be good. But certainly didn't want to limit you all as far as your creativity here, so. So taking all this into consideration, so you've got your vision, your mission, your other types of goals on there, values type goals, and all of the information up here. What do you think should be your 5-year strategic goals? And we're just gonna excuse me, just one second, we're just gonna brainstorm, so don't worry about, whether they're the right ones or the wrong ones right now. Let's just get them up there. And I think is it Carolina? Carolina, God, I started to say Carolina. She had her hand up first, sorry, Cynthia. And go ahead.
So for me, I think the first one should be funding. Getting fully funded by the county, finding other methods of funding to come in. I don't think we're gonna get far if we don't have the funding.
I second that.
Who said they second? Oh, you did. And then Cynthia, you have.
Well, actually, I was going to say something similar, sustainable funding source. So it's basically. same.
You'll notice on the worksheet that I provided that on the second page, that is on the objectives. When we drill it down, I'm sure a lot of you, if you've worked in the kind of business world that I know you all have, there's something called SMART goals or SMART objectives, and I just outlined it here so that if anybody can't remember what all the acronym stands for. I don't know that at this high level, you have to worry about that as much, but I do think you'll want it to be a little more specific as far as maybe what you're trying to accomplish when, what's the end for this in the 5 years? Where do you want to be? So I'm not saying you do it right now, but it's just something to be thinking about. So what does it mean to be sustainable, in other words, at some point? And then when we get to the objectives, they need to be really specific.
It's not
Strategic-
using our reserves for operating budget.
Oh, no. That's specific.
And having resiliency and capacity to grow. One of the strategic goals I want is either a strategic plan or something like that for the facilities. So that we know about building a capital plan if we need to do it. Architecture, do we need new property? I think we should start that now.
Can we lump that under obtaining a state-of-the-art facility?
Yeah. But
Look at all the-
I'm,
And
yeah,
all the little things leading
Well,
to
'cause, yeah,
get you to
would
that
be-
point?
Yeah, the higher overarching goal might be that it's
state of the
a
art
new,
facility.
state-of-the-art facility, no matter what that looks
Right.
like. And then we can have,
Then you do
the SMART goals.
then you
and
do the,
objectives.
Yeah,
then you do the
objective
study
would be
for it, and you do
within a
the
year,
fundraising, and
Yes,
there's all kinds of different things out of that, as
Right.
a goal, an overall goal to aim for would be something along those lines.
just as there is with this, there'll be
Yeah.
other sub
Yeah.
And to go
objectives to your
along with that,
funding.
changing state law to allow medical care within shelters.
I may not have control over that one,
Yeah.
though, Lisa.
But you got people here. And we have an ex-commissioner who would help us, in state ledge. And me, who knows the state association, and I'm already agitating to meet with the executive board.
Well, and that gets down to the final thing of this session is what are those things that you all could help with removing some of those barriers that might exist now, so. Once we get to that point. What else at the,
Well, Sarah started out by talking about having a better relationship with the community and being more community focused. So it'd be nice to aim for some sort of a goal in the way of that community focus with including the community and looking at what they're wanting and needing. And being able to supply that.
Number 3 be better, because you talked about codes and everything. Maybe that would be more an overarching evaluation of codes and laws that we need to address to do what we think we need to do.
With community needs, our community focus also, to meet those needs, I also think that comes with the education piece of what we do, and because I feel sometimes there's a disconnect in that profession.
say that again, the first part of what you
Both
said.
community focus and meet needs, also it's education.
Oh, education. Excuse me, just one second, education about what is offered or education about what you all talked about earlier as far as animal?
Both.
Or
Yeah.
like who, or like who and what we are as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, that's the part I thought you meant, okay,
But there's also humane education
Yeah.
for the community,
okay.
so that they know how to deal.
So it's
with
about the
those.
services and about the,
Yeah, so like programs and services that are more community forward.
gotcha. And then somebody, okay.
I was just gonna make the comment that Commissioner partially, that, some of the, like this change state law to allow medical care, is getting into that hyper specific, which is great for objectives. I think if we're looking at a kind of a broader to say animal care, and that is what those changes are getting at.
I agree. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bug you.
Okay, say again how I changed this. This was this one,
Well,
right?
my recommendation is, I think those are great, and I know this is, we're just kind of throwing everything
yeah.
out there, but that looks like that'll be a great opportunity for an objective. And there could be a
Right.
broader.
Oh, you're
goal
saying, you didn't
area.
say what the broader thing.
That would be animal care, improving animal care.
And then one of the
Gotcha.
objectives would be changing municipal codes upwards of state law to assist with that.
I think we could put less euthanasia as a broad goal, particularly thinking about like the feral cats, not having TNR.
Yep,
Thanks for bringing that up.
yep, I like that.
Which I guess like the TNR would be the objective to achieve the goal of less
And that could,
euthanasia.
It can also fall under broader community programs or animal care as well by actually having a community cat program.
And it would also hit our threats and our weaknesses of burnout and all these other things.
It also ties into medical care,
Medical care again.
which whether that wants to be under animal care or if we want to call out medical as its own objective, I don't have a, I could go either way.
I don't think we need to.
Think you need to what?
Well, I think medical care is gonna become huge.
That it needs to be its own.
Objective probably underneath improved animal care, which I think is.
Okay, which is what you were
Yeah.
suggesting. I'm gonna try to color code here to capture, because I'm hearing. And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing not only combos, but let's see, kind of sub
State-of-the-art
bullets. So,
facility.
yeah, so we have, so that's orange. Yes, there you, thank you. Which goes with this, and then we have animal care with medical. Where's medical? Guess we didn't. have it.
It's all up underneath.
Just directly 2 lines below what you just saw. Medical care, is right under change state law.
Oh, it was a separate one. I wrote over mine. Thank you. And then the other one was, I think, the evaluation of codes and laws was the other one someone suggested was a higher level. And then this one was kind of on its own. I think everything else, oh no, community focus.
And I don't know if this goes under funding or not, but the discussion and goal of a nonprofit.
So to become a nonprofit or
To
to
become a nonprofit.
develop a side nonprofit?
I don't know if that's a objective or.
That was in the governance, so looking at a improved governance system.
Yeah, as you say, are we sure
Would be
that
the-
it's a
would be the
goal
overall,
to become a
the
nonprofit?
nonprofit, the best way to go.
That's
And
right.
to look at the governance completely from all aspects and decide, figure out what's the best way to do it.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
So if I may offer a summary, I would say do an assessment of current and potential governance structures.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
At least it gets down on the weeds like.
Yep, you brought it back up. You did good. And I didn't know how to put it, so I wasn't even sure if it was an objective. So thank you, Ben.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Y'all do your own work in combining and this is good. Any other of the, high level potential 5-year strategic goals?
Is reduced euthanasia under state-of-the-art facility?
I mean, it could fit under a great number. It could fit under a state of the art. It could fit under animal care.
Medical care?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's a great
That could
goal
be
and I'm
municipal
for it. Don't get me
laws.
wrong.
I said, that one kind of fits.
Under everyone.
Or is that like, I guess I would look at it as that's one of the things driving all of these, like,
That's not necessarily a goal, it's
It's almost.
something that's pushing us towards goals.
Vision.
Yeah.
yeah, I would say that's probably is more of the vision.
What laws do you have to change for that one? That you have to be a vet to do the,
There's some state laws around what veterinarians have to be able to do. There's also some municipal codes. Heather, Andrew, and Andrew were going to start combing over our local codes on what prohibits us from being able to do return to field, which would be the TNR for feral cats. And there are some minor ones that I can point out. For example, it's a catch-22 because one of the ones is defining like what makes an owner, and that's like care and feeding for 14 days. But then somebody who, let's say, is a caretaker for a feral cat colony, then would be considered their owner. And then under other municipal codes, so let's say your neighbor is very unhappy, and so they're saying that the cats are like damaging their property. So then this person could be held with all sorts of fines, so that as well as like property damage fines for any of the feral cats in the community that they may have been choosing to feed. So it kind of
Cats fall into nuisance laws
Yeah.
and things like that, whereas in other jurisdictions and other cities, they're just considered free roaming and they don't fall into those. And so it becomes problematic in a lot of these instances, because what we could do on one end is just say, okay, we're gonna offer surgery to bring you your cats, you're releasing them back to wherever you're going. We can do that. But as soon as we get the complaints about the cats, then we have to go then pick them up and bring them in, and then that basically defeats the purpose.
and it makes it harder for us to, like, let's say somebody brings in a cat that is obviously feral, like we can't touch it, it's in a trap, but it isn't neutered. The only option if we kept it would be to euthanize it, to kill it, because we can't hold it safely. So the best thing for that animal would honestly be to be neutered or spayed and then just return back to where it came from. And that even goes, what's harder for some people is the friendly ones, because there's a lot of people who have friendly outdoor only cats. That, you know, somebody brings in, oh, it must be lost because it's friendly and it's outside. And really it was somebody's outdoor cat that they just trapped and brought to us that they'll never see again, because most people don't go looking for their cats because they assume something bad happened to them, coyote, dog, hit by a car, you name it. So a community cat program becomes more of an overarching, because you're returning those cats to the community. It increases the overall live release rate and length of stay for cats in general. And then you're also not taking away potentially somebody's cat too, but then you're also reducing the reproductive capabilities of the feral cats.
Sorry.
No, it's just the one last thing that is actually overarching is there's a law that doesn't allow shelters of any kind or humane societies to do medical care above a certain level, period. And after a certain number of days, it was passed in 2019. So that's and then the Practice Act, which is a beast to open back up, which would be, that's going to be the harder one. I think we could get to medical care faster than we can to open the Practice Act. We just opened it up to get some laws changed, and it took a year and a half in the legislature.
Just a little side note, if you will, not if, when you get to that point of looking at the wording for laws, I'd be happy to help provide some examples, because we've worked in other communities as well as we work a lot with Alley Cat Allies, which I'm sure you know and have used their resources. They just have a lot of examples of how to do it and to change the wording so it does work for community cats, but still accommodates all, the other issues. But so any other high level, I know we didn't quite decide where euthanasia fits. It sounds like it's more part of the mission, but I think it'll fall out anyway, if that's true, when we do a little the narrowing down here. But are there any high level, looking back at your you can see the weaknesses and the opportunities, especially looking at the opportunities, I think. But as we said, weaknesses and threats can be also opportunities. Anything you're missing that's, up there?
I think the one thing that is the partnership piece that could be under community focus. I don't know, but there's plenty of partnership opportunities that allow us to extend what we actually do through other parts.
Do you think, should I put it here, or do
do you
you
guys
feel it
think?
should be a standalone?
I kind of think it wraps into the community education focus, because the education and community, you could almost say community being, it includes organizations as well.
So maybe it's more like community, like I had it in my head like 2 seconds ago, but like instead of like education can be like one of the objectives and stuff, but maybe it's more like community focused
Involvement.
programs and involvement, you know, something along those
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
And then we can.
Yeah, that's good.
That's the higher level, yeah.
And that would also go into the more languages, opportunities and everything else. Yeah, you got all.
I mean, we got a lot right there with those 4 things.
Yeah, we
Because I
do.
have like the 4 overarching is facilities, whatever that looks like. Animal care, which includes like medical codes and laws, community cats, behavior. Then we have community, you know, community centered relationships. And then we have the evaluation of the entire governance structure. Those are some pretty.
Funding.
Funding.
The funding is good.
We got it.
Thank
I
you.
think that's
Thank you.
almost the top thing.
So the other was evaluation of codes and laws, but I think somebody said that
That
fell
could
under
go in
something
the-
else too.
Like
Animal
animal
care.
care.
And probably governance
Well, in community.
and
like that
community.
Okay,
falls under a
so,
lot.
yeah, it's one of those that goes across. So, so that leaves, and this one we decided was, you agreed was part of the overall vision, mission.
the ultimate
And also
goal.
goes, exactly. So that leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you feel like you want to go with 5, or do you want to narrow it down to 3 to focus on? Doesn't mean you don't do the other things, but as far as you know, really
We
putting
should
your effort-
prioritize these.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna do next, so that's what
Oh, sorry.
no, that's why I was asking the question, if you want to, I was gonna prioritize it. Yeah, I was gonna help you. So let's do this, because this is something that I use a lot in my facilitation for determining, not only for prioritizing, but also sometimes to determine consensus on something. It's a polling strategy. I don't know if anybody's used this before, but you have, yay, everything. It's just very helpful when you kind of want to assess where everything's at and or prioritize. So, and then there's a second step that we can do that would be just weighted voting, that would go back more to the prioritization. So I'm just going to go through the 5 key ones here. And this means 100%. If I was in charge, it's totally what I would do. This means maybe not my first choice, but I will support it 100%. And this means can't support it right. I don't want to support it right now, but it might mean you just need more information. You want to understand it better, or you have the information to share and you're willing to talk about it. Sorry.
Diane, just for kind of ease of readability, does it make sense to write the 5 specifically that you are going to be getting
Sure.
consensus from this group from?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then we'll just. Can I abbreviate if we'll understand what they are?
Yeah.
Ranked choice voting.
Yeah, so I was gonna do a weighted voting. I think that's the same thing.
This is gonna take us as long as it took New York City.
This Libya City Council did it and had this program and it was done before they even tallied the vote. I don't know what happened and they love what they're saying. It was their program.
Okay, I think I captured them correctly. Check me, and does everybody understand? I know that's really abbreviated, but based on the discussion, we know what those 5 are, right? Okay, so again, back to the polling. So 100% first choice, may not be first choice, but 100% support, don't support. And I'm talking about not support the concept. It's about supporting it for being one of your 5-year strategic goals. And then we'll discuss it if there's anybody that's in the downward mode, okay? So funding, this is getting sustainable funding sources.
There's the goal here so that we end with 3.
Not necessarily yet, this is just to get an idea of,
Importance.
this is just whether you think it should be one of the,
So we only get 1 thumbs up.
no, you're gonna go each one. Do you think funding should be that you support it 100%, it's 100% first choice, you support it, may not be first choice, or you don't think it should be one of your strategic goals, whether there's 3, 4, or 5. Yes,
Can I just make a point of clarification?
Sure.
quickly, or just rather a question to posit for this group? The governance structure, is that connected to having sustainable funding sources? Or is that something that is separate and outside of
good question.
joint animal services?
Kind of are linked, but at the same time, going from this to nonprofit is different radically, but it does affect funding. So I can see how they're kind of tied together. I'm not saying we're going nonprofit, I just, what if?
I'm kind of looking at it in timeframe, that we have an issue of funding right now.
Yeah,
Governance is something that can be put off a little bit, but we have
this is 5 years.
we have a funding issue right now, and so
Yeah, it's a 5
That's-
years,
So
yeah.
let me maybe rephrase that question. What is the goal of looking at governance structure?
Yeah, I think that governance structure serves the funding question because the only purpose of looking at governance structure is like, can you deliver the same amount of services for less money? Or can you deliver better services for the same amount of money? Otherwise, what's the purpose of looking at governance structure?
And that may be the answer for funding.
so now we've got it
We
down to
have to go
4.
look at that. Yeah. So yeah, there you go.
Is that,
We're getting close to 3 already.
yeah, there you go.
Well, let's go through the list.
Let's do this, because then we can see if people, this would be I'm assuming then that means that would be a down for you because you'd want to discuss it.
Well,
Doesn't mean you don't support
No,
it.
I'm just asking the question because to me, it seems like it's highly
Yeah,
connected.
that's what I'm saying, though. It just would
Joint
mean
animal
that,
services funding and not a standalone.
right. No, I just meant, this means you want to discuss, that we want to discuss as the group, so not do it. But,
I have one question
yeah.
for clarification before we go on facility. Is the goal of facility meaning to have a brand new facility in 5 years?
No, it's to
Assess.
evaluate the facility and the needs
Yeah,
and then determine how you're gonna get there.
Okay.
Outcome may be a new facility or.
which
Maybe
may
we either
include-
decide that at the end of 5 years, we will have a plan to either say we're gonna go for a new facility or improve this current facility, not to actually have it
And we'll have a
completed.
funding structure set up to help us get there.
And that's why I said you need to have more definition on some of these, and we do have notes on our master list here, but that's even probably not enough, it's like it's being pointed out.
Question, how do you get to
Okay,
One last one.
No, and that's where I thought we were going, but I just wanted to make sure we weren't
Yeah.
voting on it, because I'm like, in 5 years, I'm like, I don't
No,
know.
that's a good clarification question,
Yes.
because that's the difference between me having a panic attack.
Right? Because I'm like, I don't think we can have one built in 5
Yes,
years.
you have to know where, yes.
So the way I'm understanding this one, it's to have sources of sustainable funding in 5 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
With some details. So is that one are you,
My representative is voting.
Shannon is the city liaison.
okay,
So technically.
all right. So the facility, as I understood what was being said, is to have a plan in 5 years for either new facility renovations or something that's going to improve the current facilities. Is that what I heard?
To achieve state of the art.
Yes. And that's why I just didn't repeat everything over there, but. I'm gonna put sustainable,
That's good.
state of art plan, right? Sustainable sources. Give us a little more definition, okay. So this one, okay, so what's the poll on that one? All right. Animal care. Now, animal care is a little more complicated because we lumped multiple things under it, which was medical care, behavioral.
Possibly codes and law changes, community cat.
Yeah, there was quite a bit under that, which
Yeah.
obviously you can have objectives for each of those, or at least some of those. But basically, it's to have, this is my interpretation, substantially improved, and not that it's bad, but substantially improved medical care at the end of 5 years, covering the different, animal care at the end of 5 years, covering the different kinds of care without any more detail, okay?
Would it also cover the, enforcement arm of the whole shelter services, animal services?
I would say it could fall in either animal care or community involvement, depending on how you want to look at it.
Right.
Okay, so that is a 5-year, high-level objective. And you're deferring to her, okay. Community involvement, this is another one that had many components in our original discussion. Because mostly the different components were who was involved and how involved. So whether it's different types of organizations and the public, and then how you're actually involving. So thoughts on that one? Thumb thoughts? Okay, so, and just remember, if you do this, it means you're still supporting it 100%, okay. All right, and then the last one, based on what the conversation was earlier, that this, what I heard was that it falls under this. Is that true, or does anybody see that differently?
I look at it that as the funding falls into the governance, not the governance falling under.
Okay.
Oh, I see it the other way around, but whatever it is, they're together, in my opinion.
Same, I see them as together.
Okay, so if we combine them and figure out what that looks like as far as specific objectives, is that okay to combine?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those two?
I just think governance structure is a strategy for achieving sustainable sources.
Yeah.
Which was was your point down there, wasn't it? And I'm
Yeah.
so sorry, I can't. It's
Sorry,
Shannon.
Shannon.
Well, there's like a light, the glare on it that I can't read it. Okay, that was your point, I think, too, right?
Correct.
Okay, so they're combined, how you combine, okay. All right, that leaves you with 4 pretty big. But that's good, but you're talking about 5 years. Certainly have covered the bases here, huh? All right. Feel good about that? Then we're gonna do what Lisa was suggesting is prioritize these. Is that still, Lisa, we're down to
Well,
4.
If it would help the staff, that's what I'm thinking, because they need to know where they put their limited staffing resources.
So this is what I'm gonna suggest is a weighted voting, and the way we do that is you pick your top 3, if you had to pick 3. And then let me know, and then obviously your first choice will get more weight than your second and third. And I'll do the numbering, the addition here. If you just think about what your top 3 in order are, prioritize for you. Doesn't mean you don't think the 4th one's still important, but. Everybody have theirs? Okay, so I'm gonna go around. Shannon, are you participating in this part? Okay. And is it Mickey? No, Michael, sorry.
I'll take Mickey, that's fine. I think I would only have 2. I would just do funding and animal.
Which one's first?
Funding
Okay,
and then animal care, because I sort of see animal care as like I see the facility as being like one of the primary components of animal care. Like if we
Okay.
don't address the facility, you can't really have animal care. So animal care seems like the goal to me is to have better animal care. And that facility and community involvement are really components of achieving a greater efficacy of providing that service. So I would do like funding first and then animal care and
Okay,
not
so I'm
have
giving
other.
the first choice of 3, second choice is 2, and if you have a third, it's gonna be 1 as far as points to add up here to be able to prioritize. So Doug, what's your thoughts?
Well,
on
I'm confused now,
this? Okay,
because if you take out facility, you're also,
we're not taking it out.
well,
I just didn't give it any
it
points.
tends to, well, then it's gonna, then somebody voting for facility, now we've counteracted each other.
No, we're
Okay,
just
but it's really
prioritizing.
but it's really going into the same thing, maybe. And those two of them combined would be a higher number of points than the other one, so that'd be the top priority as opposed to,
Right.
so,
Well,
so
I want
everybody
that
needs to be
to be
voting
the
on the
top
same
priority.
4 things or same 5 things.
We are.
I mean, if it's a dot exercise, you can allocate your dots however you want to. I just allocated them that one.
Let's see what the end result comes up with,
Yeah.
and then we can have a
Yeah.
discussion about how.
Do you
We're
have a
basically doing the
first
dot
choice?
thing just without. the
Yes,
stickers.
this is the dot thing. Yes,
Yeah.
this is true.
I have a first choice is funding,
All right, what's your second?
but now that's where I'm confused, okay?
Well, you get,
What
you
else?
have 5 dots. You can allocate the dots however you want. Well, or do we only have 4? Oh, you gave me 5.
Would no be 6?
You
Could be
didn't
6
pick
days.
you didn't pick yours.
Yeah.
One.
So
We're
the
just-
governance is up as under the funding, so that's the same, that's good.
Yes,
Yeah.
these are the 4 things, but I'm asking you to pick your top 3. So your 4th gets 0. So it'll be 3, 2, 1, 0. So what, you said this was your first, what's
Yeah.
your second?
Facility,
Okay, and third,
animal care.
all right? And Sarah,
Funding. Animal care. Community.
Andrew,
Animal care. Funding. Facility.
and Lisa.
Funding. Animal care.
And Cynthia.
Funding, animal care and community, because I think facility falls in.
I know, Michael, great moment of clarity for me.
You can always have objectives, so it's, and they're not going away, so.
Funding. Animal care. Community.
Okay, so for here we have. 2, 6, 8. To get a feel for prioritization.
Does that help you, Sarah? A little? She's like, yeah, oh my God, no.
I totally believe in the facility thing, but I think you can't do it without funding.
Right, yep.
Well, let me just suggest one thing also to kind of goes back to the conversation you two were having. Sometimes the wording will help you with the promotion of it or the in the community or with other government officials or whatever, whoever else is involved. So some of it could be, even though something can fall under something, that you may need to have some wording or emphasis on it for a different reason than just accomplishing it or help accomplish it. So just think about that too. Not saying what does or doesn't, but
I mean, for me, it's, Michael, thank you. You just, like the comment that Shannon made about governance and funding and Doug made about a couple of my ideas that you can take it up and to achieve good animal care, we're going to have a state-of-the-art facility. It's just, that
Of
is
course.
going to have to happen. So it sort of seems like that falls under there.
yeah. And I'm just saying, look at it from a PR point of view too. That's all I'm suggesting. It may be, I'm not saying you should, but you may want them separate just for that reason, not because it's gonna change what you do.
Right.
But if you keep going up
Yes,
and making
everything
things
will be up.
smaller and smaller and smaller, stuffing things under different places, you no longer have that separation. You no longer have that point of view of saying, I need to solve this. I
Right.
need to get to this point. and I need to get to this point. And so when you
Right.
start cramming them together, you no longer have that, I need to get to this point.
Right.
And
But
so there comes a
objective-
place where you can't go any higher. To where we are right now is the place where you can't go any higher. We're at a place where everything's there, all tumbled up together and we're not doing anything.
Yeah, but under each one, under each goal, then you have an objective, which is facility, objective, which is maybe governance. I'm just throwing that, a governance structure, objective, and then under that is the way to get to that, those tasks, eventually you get to tasks to go up
Specific
to
actions.
the goal.
But there, I think the point is there's overlap in all of these things and there's always going to be. So I think what might be helpful is the next step, which is to actually look at these 4 and what those objectives are. And maybe at the end of that, you decide that they really doesn't make sense to be separate, but maybe it does because there are things that are going to be objectives for one that aren't
Yeah.
in the other. So
I think like part of this too is like with your longevity, Doug, of working within the facility much more closely than most of us, you have like a very clear vision of the ways the facility is inadequate, especially with like the stuff you guys have worked on with the sounding, like the, what's it called? The
sound dampening.
sound dampening and stuff. Whereas like when I'm looking at the facility, I like my perspective is, well, everyone tells me that the facility is inadequate. I don't really know the ways in which it's inadequate. I know that we want to provide higher levels of care. I need to have a greater understanding of the ways in which the facility is an obstacle to providing those higher levels of care. Before, like to me, having a facility as the goal is not that, like that sort of gets ahead of the question of how do we provide greater service and better levels of care. Like the facility is the tool to provide that, not a goal in and of itself. Like if we could provide that care without spending all the money to fix the facility, that'd be great. But I haven't seen an analysis that says that's not possible. And since, I have much less familiarity with animal care and whatever we do to make sure that the animals are healthy and stuff, like that's an analysis I have to see.
And I have to tag on to Michael there. I see facility as probably being the top objective, if not one of the goals, because we've all said that. I've seen it. And you know it. I think Michael put it very well. We have an issue that we need to bring this facility up to state of the art.
So the other thing, I'm going back to what Andrew said about animal care. At first I thought, well, is that the top one? But you cannot get to animal care without having an organization that is stable with funding so that they can launch off into doing the correct thing. And that's why I chunk the funding up above animal care, because you're right. The whole thing is to make sure you have good animal care.
Absolutely agree.
But you can't do it without an organization.
But I think we're going back to Doug's point of, yes, you keep moving everything up and all you have everything under
Well,
one
that's
giant
true.
bucket, which I don't think you need to worry about. Do we have the exact right goals here? But are these the right, as far as a hierarchy, but are they the right things to focus on? I think that's really what how I would look at it personally. And whether one overlaps another or is a subset, are these really the key points that need attention over the next 5 years?
Well, I would almost look at the fact that we do have so much overlap means that we're on the right track, because every goal or every higher arching goal is feeding into itself, and all the underlying goals and objectives that we create, again, are all feeding into it. So, we don't have to tighten this up anymore if we don't want to, because, in essence, they're all going to feed into each other. We can prioritize some stuff because, like you said, funding is the most important. We've already made the commitment to reduce what we pull from reserves each year, which means that at end of year 4, the jurisdictions are going to be at fully funding without reserves. that means we have to get to a point, but that we can still add stuff, because like what we're talking about, even for animal care, costs money. Like to have just the staff for an animal, like for medical stuff, we're looking at anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 a year added for staff, for medical. You know, so, and that's a hard thing for the jurisdictions to vote on all of a sudden after this reduction, you know, in using reserves to then now say like, we want to add this. So, I mean, it all feeds into
Well,
each other to take care of that.
But this is a big piece of that.
Yeah.
too. It may not be the, so, okay, so the next step is to, what at least what I'm suggesting is that we divide into smaller groups to focus on these 4, as far as the second page I gave you that's called 1-year objectives. So for each, oops, where's page 2? Oh yeah, there we go. Yes, I just realized I didn't make enough copies.
I can go run and
Yeah,
get some
this
copies.
one needs to be for each.
Of this one, more copies of this?
Yes, ma'am. We need one for each.
Does this seem like a natural break then?
And that's what I was gonna say also.
Yes, I'll wait
Yes.
until we finish then, and then I'll go make copies.
Yes, I was gonna suggest that, but why I wanted to say this is while you're taking your break, if you think about which ones you really you personally would like to focus on based on your own experience or your own interests or passion. So we can break out into groups, look at some specific objectives, and then come back with the bigger group and share and discuss, okay? Does that sound okay? All right, so this is a 10-minute,
Yes, that way it gives me time to make copies.
or if you show me, I can,
Nope, we're
if I'm
good.
allowed to roam. All right.
Take this back to the city.
Oh, my car.
Oh, yes, and I was supposed to help remind you. Obviously, I didn't.
I know, that's the hardest
We all need
part.
No, I'm plugged in.
Presenting
Oh.
I'm plugged into the plug and they don't want you to stay there for more
You
than
know,
3
we
hours.
used to have things here where I could scribble and.
Right.
I'm gonna be a good neighbor.
Thank you, Doug.
I do have a way to pop some information in, but I have to have my notes to pop it into.
I know, and I'm so spoiled with multiple screens now. I have 3 screens. That when I have to work off one screen at the dais, I'm like, I'm losing all the, because I can have all 3 of the meetings I did before on Zoom on my 3 screens. So I can go, I went to this and this is that, but on one screen, I'm not doing it, so I'm going back. and doing it.
Well, me too, or I have my iPad and my personal computer, which I can zoom on, but yeah, I just, and I do try to log it down, but the way I used to function has changed and it's just getting harder.
I know it is.
And I'm thinking maybe I'm old, but I don't think it's just that.
No, because like if you think about me using 3 screens simultaneously, going back to 1, so I keep having to tell myself I'm going back to 1. So I'm going back to older technology.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have at the dais if I had my way 3 different built-in screens that I could log in and.
Thought I could switch
set
right
up.
No problem.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
For your agenda items, think about that. We're going to this and we're gonna talk about that next and those, and you have all your reports on all 3 of them.
Orca, when I take notes for that, I have to sit and think what I've written because I'm so scribbled and it's so technical and
Oh, I
because it's
know.
all air quality.
You know what, you're making me think, I need to get, and probably bring the way to get 2 screens would be to have the city one and my personal.
And
one.
nobody-
My personal one would just have the
nobody's
reports, up, but
breaking.
my city one would have all the stuff for the agenda and everything.
Which is a.
See, I do just the opposite. I do the Zoom on my. personal.
So which, Shannon, which city are you?
City of Lacey.
Yeah, we're in person now,
So
so.
we are the administration.
Yes, I knew that part, and that's why I thought.
I'm gonna
Is that
go-
a hammock
I'm gonna
in your
go
office?
check
Yeah.
my-
No, it's in her house. I wish I had a hammock.
It's interesting in Nevada, the counties are like geographically huge. I mean, probably because we don't. At least other than Las Vegas,
Sure.
it's weird when you go to other states and they're so, because this is so close to Seattle, I would have thought.
That was been a long
in
time.
our area that would have all been part of one big county, but
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Well, even Las Vegas, it's Clark County, right?
Right.
that runs it.
Another one, and she was just.
No, Clark County, well, actually, it's a
She's my
private
mom.
nonprofit that has there are 3 cities there, 3 incorporated cities, and there's the county. So it's Las Vegas, Henderson, and North Las Vegas. Those are all, and they all have their own.
Summerlin not incorporated? That's a
No.
city.
Yeah, I never really understood. I always thought it was just like a neighborhood, but it's not as far as animal services. So I don't think it's incorporated in general, but it doesn't have its own animal services. So it could be that it is incorporated and falls under the county. But so there's 4 animal services, but the Animal Foundation, which is a private nonprofit, has 3 of the 4 contracts.
Yeah, my
So
sister.
Henderson is the only one that isn't part of it.
Second, Henderson South.
Yeah, well, it's, I'm too old for that. You can't do that. I mean, you don't know when you,
No.
yeah, it's a little.
They're very familiar with one particular
Right.
area, but the jurisdictions don't have, I guess, they're kind of jagged boundaries, you know, they.
Well, that's what
they
she was
make
trying to tell me.
historical
So it kind of
sense.
goes like this, and I said, okay. Yeah, but even when you have clear, I mean, what I think Doug had mentioned that it gets calls and or emails from people that don't have, I mean, that same was true.
What?
And because we had the county, animal
Oh,
services. and we
I
had
did some of that for
Humane
you.
Society, we had the SPCA, North
Yeah.
Dakota,
I saw
another
that.
piece.
Thank
I
you.
finished my
Nobody
list
knew-
on Sunday.
Oh, thank
Nobody
you.
knew the difference. Oh, and they
Sure,
didn't
I
know
mean, so
that-
there's the jurisdictional boundaries, then there's the entities and how they serve them
Yes,
and what
and how you
gaps they
serve.
serve and. who
So-
they're
You and
And it gets
Jim
even more
and
complicated with
yeah.
the nonprofit.
Yeah, I'm
because
handing
you've
out
got
Dante,
the
Jim,
Humane Society of the United
yeah.
States and America.
They didn't have any Dante or
SPCA, which everybody thinks there's some affiliation, which there's
Scott.
none, and.
flyers in my,
it's-
the ones they gave
And
me.
that's
it was
why
just
we
you.
ultimately
I-
had to,
I
because we were the
have a
largest
few of the
shelter, but we
board
were.
and a few of
nonprofit,
the,
And we set up
board if people
our own
ask,
health, animal health. desk,
especially now that
and
they're voting.
Basically wanted one place.
So people have asked me if
call.
they like
Stop
me,
shop,
then they'll
you
be
know,
like, who else should I be
yeah,
looking at?
yeah. And if we would
You
just,
have-
either
does
something
Joel-
we could deal with, or we tell them.
Joel's
where to go.
district
No,
has
you need to call-
crossover with the.
Yes, it has to go
Yeah,
to the
a
county
little bit of,
animal
Jesse.
services, because they have.
Oh,
to
okay.
The very southeast.
But Jesse doesn't have a primary, does he?
So it just made it
It's just Joel.
easier for
It's
people,
Joel.
but it's
I've
still.
been, yeah, especially with the EIS.
And it's
coming out.
different
Have
everywhere.
You guys
that's
had
what-
your,
It is, it's so
You know,
great.
They're briefing on it.
Yeah, it's.
did Pete talk to you about what happened at the exec committee?
Right. Was it Jeff?
No, actually, it was the consultants. They're the ones that put in the designation.
I know, I'm just thinking that I.
Like,
just-
is there really a historic district?
I've yet to hit my
The
saturation.
dam is a historic structure.
It never
Ty's
keeps me
comments were the
awake,
best.
though,
They
so I'm
were,
not one that-
a dam should never be considered a historical object.
Yeah.
It's fine, I'll just crash one.
But the consultants themselves for the EIS put the designation,
Why?
which I think is a conflict of interest, but I could be wrong.
Why'd they do that?
I haven't adequately answered that question to me.
I don't know the facility well enough. Is there a good water fountain for Doug to refill that?
That is an excellent question, Doug. I can fill it up.
Because
for
you guys are lawyers, how do you?
Do I trust you holding this
I'll-
valuable?
Especially at this age.
That metal Starbucks container?
White privilege, how do you weigh thousands of years of cultural significance for the Squaxin
Think
tribe?
about, that's a thing of the
And the
past, too.
Nisqually, if you consider Bud
Always had
Inlet
fountain water
impacting
Yeah.
Nisqually. Versus 73 years of a dam. I don't know how you weigh that. I don't
By
know
that
that-
logic too, are
Hmm?
roads, are
Well, I
roads
noticed in
historic
my, in my
structures?
hotel
Yeah.
room, there was no ice bucket, and I'm
Doesn't
sure
make any
that,
sense.
I'm so used to going in.
It doesn't to me either.
I was like, oh, that must be why.
When they started presenting it at the exec committee, I was like, I'm having a fundamental problem here. I don't understand how that could be.
Yes, it was.
considered.
It was fun.
I had to.
Well, this paper mill's a historic structure. Historically, it's been polluting for years. We can't just tear it down and clean it up.
Well, what about that? My thought was, if you're gonna go down that pathway, what about the old historic brewery? There was no lake when it was there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
COVID, it was not what I thought it would be.
Fun time.
I don't know, is Ty's there? Is he there for the county?
You know.
Yeah, well, this was only my second night in a year and a half after.
I got the feeling they're pushing us towards the lake.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the other one was. a couple months ago.
Consultants have a bias.
I think it had coffee too, but it had the little, it just had a regular little coffee maker with.
They
the
seem
little
to
packets
sort
that
of
you put
like-
in the thing.
I don't know. I kind of felt that way
Yeah, I
about them
can't-
presenting the hybrid option.
People are saying they're now, yeah.
So you got your water.
I did, thank
I may
you.
have misread it,
I
but
have potential kidney issues, and so I have to drink
The
2 of
hybrid,
those a day.
It's probably good for
I'm
anybody,
meeting
but
with,
yeah.
the expense, the money for the lake
It's,
option.
You
is
spend your
like
time walking between
astronomical.
where you're
That's
drinking
it
and the bathroom.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Wild.
that's the
I thought that
downside.
the managed lake was going to be like the cheapest one,
Okay, we are on that.
so that they could like sandbag the other thing.
Cancel that before it dings again.
well, they didn't include the,
And you got
the dredging. They will still have to do
Yes,
it at the port. I asked them why they did
Andrew
it.
With initial
dispersed.
conversations, I
okay.
thought the highway was the most expensive.
No, the
Extras.
Oh, there we
dredging
go.
for the
Alright,
managed lake
Okay.
is over $100 million more than either the estuary or the hybrid.
In the high end, it's like 300 million. Because there's a range, 300 to 600
There's needs to be a certain people on.
for the managed lake. The estuary is 100 and
There's
change
8,
and
so we can
300
do this one,
range.
2 ways.
Just
We could
for
have-
the
But
dredging, they'll
it
have to
stands
do.
If you know anything
Or
about
those two.
So if they take the dam
dredging
out,
and
capital lake.
Well,
river.
they're downplaying
Yeah,
of
even if
water
they keep the
quality. and
dam
that's about
in,
why, and I meet
the amount
with
of
Lisa
dredging they'll
Dennis
have to
Perez.
do is
So why don't they
Tomorrow
300
morning
to
because they're coming to
Everybody
Olympia.
picked 2, they want
Just
to
for
see how it
They're,
falls out.
they only
Yeah, it's been
consider
going down to the
them-
streets
Yeah.
for years.
Yeah.
They're not out into
Okay.
budget.
Could that get rid of the, whatever the parasite is, it's in the,
So that's why it's so
New Zealand, whatever.
expensive, is because if you keep it as a lake, then you have to take that dirt that has the parasite to eastern Washington and dump it somewhere over there. That's why it's so expensive.
And I
Turn it into an estuary, you don't
still
She
have
said,
to-
I said, I'm having
Yeah.
significant difficulties with the water quality part of this. And it's impacted a lot. And she wrote and said, yes, I am too. We need to meet. So I want to present this to the whole council here.
chance for the city council, if he wants to get together and talk about
And
current issues.
Because that was our argument too.
Can we?
Sorry.
No, that's okay, I just wanna get,
For
use the time.
There's animals that live in the lake too. You can- Nutria,
Alright,
some
Yeah.
snail or
so
something.
here's what we're suggesting is that we divide, not necessarily the way the room's divided, but into 2 groups of 4. And then each group works on 2 of these as far as defining objectives. And Andrew passed out some additional copies of this because these are basically set up to use 1 strategic goal per page there. So, and you can write your own notes. So hopefully you thought about which ones you prefer to be a part of as far as the initial drafting of some possible objectives. So I'll just go around and we'll see how it divides up, and if it doesn't divide up evenly enough, we'll do some juggling. So Carolina, did I say it right that time? Okay, which 2 would you prefer?
I'll do funding and I guess I'll go with my top 2 animal care.
Well, think about it from the perspective, yeah, if you've got some specific, not just what you care about, which I'm sure you all care about all of
Actually,
them,
I'll go with community involvement.
and something, yeah, you have a perspective on that would be helpful. Instead of,
Animal care.
let's see if it works to use first initials of first names. Already doesn't, Cynthia.
Here I am. Cynthia.
I'll be, C, yeah, okay, CP.
So mine is funding first and what do I know about? Community involvement.
Okay, and Lisa?
Funding. Animal care.
That makes sense for you. Andrew?
Animal care and facility.
All right, and Sarah, you want me to come back to you
Come
after?
back
we're-
to me after.
All right,
we've
Shannon, are
done the
you?
dance.
Funding and community involvement.
And Michael, not Mickey,
I don't know what we're choosing.
to work in this breakout session to define objectives, to draft objectives.
Is facility one, and we haven't talked it into being someplace
No.
else? Okay, I
Nope,
may
there's four.
change something then. I want to be off of community involvement and the second is facility.
Okay. Okay, Michael,
I still don't get it. If we're dividing by half, then
we're trying to divide into two breakout sessions where you will focus, each breakout session will focus on two of these goals to draft objectives, not to determine the final objectives, but to draft some.
okay. I'll do animal care because there's fewer people on that.
It's like LA, huh?
And
Lisa Andrew.
I guess facility because there's fewer people on that too.
Okay. And then we have Doug.
So which ones don't have 4?
Facility does not, animal care does not, and community involvement does not. Funding's the only, in other words, the only one that does.
The facility and animal care then. So we're gonna work on one of them and then change groups, because I don't think there's 2 of those that have the same 4 people.
Yeah, that's what I was confused.
Well, I was gonna see how it fell out, and then we were going to juggle, that was my juggling. But I was just trying to see what preferred and try to accommodate that. And she already said she would go wherever
I would
she.
shuffle
I
it.
also have, how about an opposing way to do it? And
Sure.
Because it'd be good to force me to consider other things than what I'm interested in.
Okay,
So maybe we just split into 2 4s and then we actually look at all 4.
you get us. The only reason I want to do breakout is the timing. It's just that's a lot to talk about
Yeah,
and
'cause
not
we
a lot
have
of
it-
time.
we
Or
have
just
it
to
on-
randomly assign
Or I
each
can
4.
randomly assign.
Yeah, and then, because I think that would be good, because
All right, I'm open. It's your,
Does anybody
Event.
have like a hard 100% they absolutely need to sit on something, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
Fantastic, then why don't you divvy us up?
divvy us up and then assign each group and then. we have
okay,
no
does
choice.
this work?
Yes.
Yes.
Then you can just smoosh together?
Or not. because
Remaining your
it's social
distance.
distancing.
Oh, sorry.
Distance.
I didn't say that. Intellectually, you'll be smushing together, not physically, okay? All right, that actually is pretty good because you divided up in some, looks like you've got this.
Fantastic.
Okay, so there, that was easy.
We'll do funding and facilities on this side.
Fantastic.
There you go. I love it. Take charge. All right,
Animal care and community involvement, there we go.
work? All right,
Work.
yay. Thank you, Shannon.
We want to move.
So
our
we're filling
changes
out the
out.
1-year objective sheet.
Move it
Yes.
out and put it.
For
a
each
arrow
strategic
behind.
goal that
So we're
you-
looking for objectives and determining whether they're smart or not.
Yes, as smart as you can get them would be helpful. Otherwise,
So you want us answering yes or no's and putting in metrics?
yes, that's just a worksheet to help
Put one of
you
these.
double check, because it,
Sounds much better. Facilities might like me better. Not destroying the carpet.
6 foot.
Do you just want to scoot it back a little bit further? You're ready to move it back?
Does it matter we're out of the screen?
I think because for this, since it's a quieter section, long as
I think we're good.
we're not
It's okay.
yelling at each
Okay.
other.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom and set it. There's one.
For the most part.
Okay.
So
But I think.
what I think I have heard, and please feel free to chime in here, but it sounds like the strategic goal for, let's start with just down funding, is to make joint animal services fiscally responsible and sustainable.
Yes,
Is there anything that anybody would add?
I would say with capacity, with the ability, like capacity to actually grow. Because as it's structured right now, the more outside revenue we bring in, it just reduces everybody's assessment.
And then like the overall budget kind of stays the same to a certain extent. I know it, like, I'm very much like simplifying it, but it, yeah, ability to like grow in capacity for budget, but then sustainable funding.
We have sustainable funding, but it's on the backs of the communities, the jurisdictions. And so I'd really like to have sustainable funding without raising the charges for the jurisdictions every year. It's kind of the, and that does governance go into that?
Could be.
So I don't think it needs to go into the goal. I think this will be a measurable objective to do an assessment on
Governance structure
structure,
and determine if that's the best.
right?
The only thing I would wordsmith out would be to say fiscal responsibility, because I think we are fiscally responsible. I like focusing on sustainability rather than.
I shall fiscally sustainable with ability to grow.
Yeah, establish fiscal sustainability and capacity to meet community need.
Okay.
So, just, I wanna, not that we need to have the perfect wordsmith here, but I think establishing, I think we have been doing a pretty good job of being fiscally like responsible and sustainable right now. So I would go with the statement like joint animal service is sustainable or continues to be sustainable with capacity to grow. So that way you don't get the impression that this entity has not been.
Eventually, so that's gonna
We sort of have it then, right?
Sure.
It's-
Yeah, I guess maybe enhancing it, right? But I think we get the general idea as being that sustainable. You're right. Okay.
Different jurisdictions are gonna have different codes, and we're gonna have to dig in.
So what are objectives?
Through our individual city lawyers or.
correct. And then you have to understand the fights that we have.
Government structure assessment, is that one?
Yeah.
I don't know if that should be the first one.
But
Especially
you're,
when you look at somewhere like Tumwater that has protected gopher or whatever that is.
That's okay, we can always like
You can cross out the 1, 2s, and 3s.
yeah.
Well, then you have to.
I think like one
Find a way.
of the
well, you
objectives
got
is like online, like online licensing, maybe that's too granular to be an objective, but like having that as a.
More revenue
Yeah,
in general.
more revenue generally. As online licensing is a tool to meet that, or a strategy rather,
Yeah, like more,
like diverse revenue streams.
yeah, I would say diverse revenue streams for sure.
They could just, we could.
Do we need a verb?
So increase and diversify perhaps?
And maybe each jurisdiction is given.
Because again, even like licensing in and of itself, even though it's considered a revenue, really just goes to reducing the jurisdictional assessments. Like that's something that goes to reduce what they pay.
That then creates more capacity for jurisdictions to have the ability
Correct.
to have higher assessments.
Correct.
To me, objective number 3.
It's a mixed bag.
Is there a need in here to look at the IGA?
To relook at the intergovernmental
Yeah.
agreement again,
I guess that would go into the governmental structure would be.
I would
looking
say
at
that'd probably go under
That would
that.
be
Didn't we
the
just
sub piece of
renew
that.
it?
Well, we just made some changes, yes.
But we also renewed it, right? Like, isn't it good for 4 years?
don't
I
think
don't
it has a
remember any
deadline.
I believe
wording
it's
that
good
has-
until somebody wants to exit and then it needs unanimous.
Yeah, it literally, we could hold on to it for 10 years if we didn't want to change it, which we were getting close.
I have a copy of the old one here. Yeah, term of this agreement shall continue until the parties by unanimous agreement vote to terminate it. So that'd be a
This is me
Something.
coming from more of a nonprofit side of things versus a government side of things. if we were a nonprofit, there would be other like social entrepreneurship things that we could be doing to build revenue. Would perhaps, is it out of question that that is something that we could be exploring either with the diversified revenue streams or pulling out like what exactly can we do to build revenue? So for example, one of my shelters, we had a thrift store. And so people would obviously donate everything. And so we could turn around and sell like somebody's couch at the thrift store for money. I don't know still, like I'm still learning all the ins and outs of what we can and can't do as far as being a government entity in that sense.
But if that relies on being a 501c3, then now you'd have to finalize that would be one of the arguments within that discussion of the governance structure to go to become a nonprofit. The nonprofit could then have these various different streams of income that the government organization doesn't have. So I can't see that as being a separate thing, but I think that's something that would be
Like under
in
something.
the governance, yeah,
Okay.
strongly under there. So we have two of them. We need to, are they,
We don't have to have 3 objectives
right?
if we don't want
But
to.
then we need to look at,
We need to-
how specific is it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Time bound.
Yeah,
So then like we have the general idea of what we want the objectives to be, but
So because our next objective to potentially look at is the question of the facility and infrastructure, I just want to see what this group thinks about that being the third objective of performing an assessment of the existing facility and facility needs moving forward.
I think that would be a good one because I think from a funding standpoint, we have to understand. Because it's also not just the facility, it's also the capacity of the community and their willingness to fund something like this, whether it's through a levy, whether it's through fundraising, however we achieve that. It's not just a facility study, but you actually kind of have to bring somebody in to do a study on what's everybody's capacity for giving and what they're willing to support. So for example, Arizona Humane Society, they did one before they started their capital campaign, and as it turns out, like what they wanted price-wise, like a $46 million facility, was not what the community was willing to fund. Like after assessments and talking to like donors and things like that, basically they were only gonna be able to fund something that was 28 million. I know only 28 million,
yeah.
but that was one of those things that they had to get into line with what the community was willing to support. And so they had to change their facilities and structure around that, or how they were gonna fundraise to meet that. Delta, one of Michael's, not Michael, one of Scott's favorite. I was thinking Michael Scott,
Terms.
sorry.
Well, people mix me and Scott up also.
All the time. No,
Interesting.
apparently it was more of like an office reference running through my head, even though I was thinking about Scott.
No. Scott and I look so similar because I'm
It's
5'6" and so is Scott.
Close. Yeah, it's very close.
So are we putting something like a facilities assessment?
I think so.
It was just a broader question for you all to consider, considering that's our next.
No, I think that's a reasonable and it makes sense.
so in terms of like performing a facilities assessment, facilities and economic availability or economic acceptance assessment. So that's something we can say, okay, is this specific enough? Are we,
Yes.
so,
I mean, I do think that's specific and measurable because those are very like action item things on that. I mean, they do again require money too, which is why I like that it's sitting under the funding portion.
What like, it sort of seems like we have several sort of areas where we're like, we need more information in terms of how we do business versus how other people do it. Like, a few of these are assessment fails. There's probably someone who could provide an assessment of our revenue streams as well and come up with other ideas. Is there like, does it exist where there's consultants in the field that are like, oh yeah, you can hire me and I'll tell you the ways in which you could do things differently from a non-involved lens, you know, like third party.
Yes,
There are consultants that'll do anything.
yes, there are.
Right, I know, this just seems.
No, there are, like, there are development and fundraising consultants that will, can look at that. And what we could be doing, sometimes the recommendations would be like, again, I'm speaking from past experience, like they hired somebody who came in and said, okay, you need $28 million. But then also to do this, you need to add 2 staff because they, you know, you have to be fundraising X, Y, and Z. And so, yes,
Yeah.
they're.
Like, we could get one person that could provide both the governance assessment as well as the facility assessment, as well as this is what you need to achieve
They would,
certain levels.
we would have a general consultant, and they would probably hire sub-consultants to do the.
Yes, or like a project manager
Yeah,
to,
and they would have, they would likely go outside their company to get the facilities person to do it, and then and
'Cause
to
the
get a
actual-
governance person to do it. Yeah.
because the fundraising portion would be much different than say, having like an architectural firm that specializes in animal shelters come in and be like,
Okay.
you know, yes,
So
this building could support renovations and holding these number of animals by our calculations, because a lot of the animal ones will use like capacity for care calculations to say like, you need a shelter that has this many kennels. And then they can say like, that's gonna equal 10,000 square feet, which yours is 8, so therefore you must expand. So yeah,
We
there's
have a lot of reserves, like we still have a pretty healthy reserve budget.
What
That
about,
would
what
be
about in
a
the first
one-time
year?
expenditure
Get
that.
some training for some of the staff.
Yes, I would absolutely advocate so that for some of those things, that would be a responsible way to spend some of those reserves that aren't dedicated
We're having our first in-person.
for some of those assessments, because it would be money put to good use in that sense of figuring out where we need to move forward.
Speaking as a project manager of things like this, you know, we would definitely have we'd want to do a study of the existing facility to see what its capacity is. And then we want to do a study of what the community needs. And then we'd need to do a study of what we could provide the community needs, and a low level, a medium level, a high level, and putting cost to all those. And then have an ability, a study of what the community could pay for.
Yep.
You know, so there's a whole bunch of different independent little studies that would all come into this, that have different people doing them. But we would want to work our way forward one step at a time to go through all those. And so-
Absolutely, and my one caution point is this is specifically designed for our 1-year objectives, so
Yeah.
that's not gonna happen.
So one of those would be like, look at the,
Complete 1 year.
we've got one of our existing facilities.
Yeah.
Kind of a partial one of our existing facility. Maybe we need to have a more formalized review of our existing facility as our 1 year.
Yes.
And then on the governance side, we may want to have something that says, well, let's look at let's do a report of the possible ways we could be governed. Not go into anyone in any great detail and try to direct us one way, but let's look at all the different alternatives, maintaining what we have right now, and look at what other people do. Get a view of the shelters and how they're run and paid for around the country.
So it's the
I'll just
1-year
make a suggestion.
objective.
You guys haven't moved on. Are you on your second? Or are you
No,
kind of
we-
doing
I-
a?
Well, we
I think
kind of
our
skip,
second is-
past our
Kinda
first
going
one.
back.
It's.
Okay, just from a time perspective, you want to be,
We're on track.
okay, good.
So is the 1-year objective then to establish a timeline by which we conduct the assessments? Like,
Be established timelines, solicit for them. I mean, I just want
Yeah.
to say, I don't think it's feasible to get it
Get them started.
performed in 1 year.
No, I would definitely see this as a like, we pick one or two things that we're doing every year as far as like assessment,
Well,
assessing.
to Michael's point though, too, I mean, you could do it the kind of piecemeal, or you could try to find the larger group that would break it into a piecemeal. I'm just saying it's probably not feasible to get this all one and done. It would be a 2-year effort.
Please no.
And going through Lacey's requirements and all that kind of stuff too. It's not something that you can go and call up a friend and say, hey, can you do this for me?
Michael, any other thoughts on that?
no, but I mean, I think we can have something like this. Like, we had government structure assessment, but maybe instead of that specificity, it should be establish a timeline for conducting assessments, including the facility one. And then
Yeah.
because that seems more achievable within a year.
Our second customer would be the people that come in for services.
So what if for the just the overarching goal, you had, the sustainable capacity to grow and establishing timelines for, future assessments? And then you can list your objectives as your future assessments.
Yeah.
All right.
I put that down as my third objective. First.
Well, there we go. We've worked it in.
Yes.
But it's a similar thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you need to establish the timeline for
Yeah.
doing because there are studies that have to be done here before I can do anything else.
Yeah.
And so establishing the timeline and getting first studies started might be a very stretch objective, given the timing.
Yeah.
And so it would be on Lacey's fiscal year probably, instead of January to December,
Calendar year.
calendar year.
So one thing now that I'm just thinking about, kind of the fiscal element that I think might want to revisit is it has the diversify revenue streams. Do we want to have some goal or objective, I should say, specific to program evaluation and being, fiscally sustainable? Because I know we're going to have our animal care community involvement, and based on what I'm seeing up here, there's going to be a lot of wanting to look into new programming or expanding
Yeah, that
existing
table over there is
programs.
gonna be expensive. We have to
Yeah,
pay
I
for
would,
it.
So I mean, I don't know, I think we could probably extend our objectives, given that we folded one of ours in, to maybe including some sort of
yes.
consideration of the programming.
Yes, I would say that would be accurate, and then I would include with diverse, I mean, it probably is also overarchingly included with diverse revenue streams, but then really assessing what grants we can use to start some of these programs for seed money. Once we've looked at how we can continue to fund them afterwards, because the grants are gonna want that anyway.
We've had a lot of different people come in and look at the facilities and write memo reports and things like that over time. Maybe we need to start compiling those into a summary.
Well, and that,
Doug, when was the last time somebody came in?
I had,
We got a report like
Yeah.
6 months or a year ago about.
ASPCA came in.
Then you had somebody from North Carolina or whatever it was.
Oh, that was the volunteer program that they
Yeah.
just did the assessment for free,
Yeah.
like the free ones. ASPCA Northern Tier, Dr. Chumke, who was the head of the program, came and did an assessment, but that was more operational assessment of like animal flow care. And that's where we came to the conclusion that we needed to bring medical in-house, and that's why we started to move doing
We had
that
the
from
one
that
from
assessment.
King County.
We had Kathleen from a couple of years ago came down and did an assessment. I've read hers.
Social media.
It was a very overarching glossed assessment with a live release rate that I still can't figure out how she got.
That's because we weren't counting all the feral cats we killed.
Yeah, she was like not counting like
But I like
a
your.
bunch of
your-
stuff, and I'm
Yeah,
like, I
remember
don't
when
understand
first
how you
joined the
got
board,
it.
The former EG was like, oh yeah, it's like 98% live release.
And then I show
we
up
were
and I'm like,
oh wow, that's really great. And then it turns out it's more like
it was
60?
74 when I got here.
74, because of course it's like
Of cats.
when you don't count the animals you kill. but-
Yeah.
So how do we get?
Yeah.
the donations?
So,
And I think that should be specific.
yeah, I was having,
not
like,
just
she didn't
something
count
that-
anything in that, but that one was a more overarching and basically was like, yeah, you have plenty of staff, and I'm like, no, we don't.
Why are you telling that to the board?
Why are you telling them we don't need more staff?
I mean, if it was
So-
true, that would be a good thing for us.
It would be, but it was not like I was having a hard time seeing where she was coming up with the capacity for care, because when I did numbers, we weren't
Yeah.
needing that. So yeah, I mean, we have had, but a lot of them were
Yeah.
free.
Free and you get what you pay for.
Yes, I think the ones that were the most useful was walking through UC Davis and ASPCA's. Because those were also self-assessments, like we didn't have to pay. You can pay to have UC Davis come and actually do
Yeah, we do that, but here's.
a facilities assessment. So they could possibly be one of the people that we solicit to apply for the RFP.
And our.
So that's where we need to
Yeah.
put together that timeline of who we want to have come in who to look at things.
Yes.
You need to pull people out. that are-
How much it's gonna cost, how do we fund those things, and we're gonna get our, put them in the budgets. So that's another reason for not doing much in the first year, you gotta get them into the budget for the next year. So the first year is you're doing, you're looking at what you wanna do and how much it's gonna cost.
So going back to objective number 2, and I know we're not listing them in order, but it is about diversifying revenue streams and leveraging technologies. As far as a like measurable outcome, I think one thing that we could measure is increasing online pet licensing and what percentage, and setting a benchmark and then a benchmark for future years.
It's gonna be great the first year, because you're comparing to nothing.
Right, well, I mean, again, you establish it, and then, kind of
Right.
increasing from there.
And then compare that to how many, just general number of licenses.
Yeah, and
So are you increasing the number of licenses by doing that or not?
we could look in general on like increased revenues, like have we increased donations? I don't want to necessarily look at like grants or bequests as things that we look at increasing, because those are
Mhm.
like this, and we shouldn't, be making goals around like meeting certain grant amounts, but
And there's a certain amount of staff resources and time that would need to be calculated into that cycle that you're just talking about. Yep, yeah, I know.
Branding.
Right, anything else from this
We
group?
need to be applying
As
for
far as
grants.
Communication takes the branding and puts it on.
We need to be applying for grants.
yes.
And don't forget that I have a 501c3 that's designed to funnel grant funds through. So the grant funder would fund my 501c3 and then I pass the money on to the people that write the grant. That's our purpose of Community Impact Association.
And that's not the Thurston County Humane Society.
No, that's one that my wife is the chair of the board. I'm a board member. We've been in existence for a number of years. The Humane Society won't want to do that.
No.
We did it in the past, but on the shelter that we're in now, when they did the fundraising, we acted as an intermediary there, but they don't want to do it again.
Yeah, no.
So can I get everybody's attention? Are you close to having, I already saw heads going yes over here, objectives?
Yeah.
At least a couple for each,
Yeah, we're almost done.
almost done, like
Like we have one more objective. and then
a
we're
couple
done.
more minutes? Or just wanna- Okay,
They're trying to figure out how to spend more money.
To get the fun one, we have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So, just so. I make
No
sure-
cat left behind over there.
and be sure
I would
each
say
of
fun
you,
is in the eye of the beholder.
each of you has a version of the notes that can come with me so that I can type it up.
Her and I kind of
I
took.
think you got it. I have very cryptic notes here.
Yes, she was the more avid note taker.
Well, I would probably rewrite this since I'm just free flowing
You
here.
got it, send it to me.
I've got plenty.
I got more sheets if you need them.
take a look at your.
Oh, mine was very simplistic.
Nope, I think this is perfect.
I take my notes like I take our board minutes, like very.
If there's a capital, lost the word, we're trying to raise money for a facility.
Yeah, capital.
There was one other thing you're gonna do on the board meeting
That's it.
besides the.
So they would be in charge of that.
Approve minutes and a budget amendment. That's all I got for this one, so we can have an emergency plumbing repair that
Now, I
we
do
need to
want to get
fix.
to one last objective on this.
But I tied in all the budget stuff while I was doing it.
For what?
We would like our internal plumbing system to work again.
Communities. were-
Oh, are you talking about the meeting tonight?
Yeah, he was asking about the meeting. 'cause he
Meeting
won't
at
be
one.
here.
Yeah, it's not at 5:30,
No, it's
right?
at 1. We're just staying for as long as it takes to approve the minutes and vote on the budget amendment.
Is there a public comment period?
There is, it has to be, but no one has at least registered with me
No one's
thus far.
registered?
It's like this-
You should check because
I am.
there's just so much like social media chatter. Did you see all the stuff that tagged Lisa and I and Andy and?
Oh, no. What's the latest? Because I don't have anything
The
here.
communication, when it's gonna take, I mean, you can do it 1 to 5 years.
There's also a slew of them I can't see because they've
I
blocked
think
me,
1 to
so
5
I
on
can't
each page.
actually see.
I believe you're described as a tyrant. Very long post.
Awesome.
And then development is 1 to 5.
See, and it's probably
this
from
is all-
somebody who's actually blocked me, so I can't
Yes.
see the
And
post.
governance.
Yeah, we've surpassed the at least written public period. They could still technically show up.
It's about the dog, I believe, is named Diamond. And getting the dog's remains.
Mhm.
It's a very long post.
You're talking about educating.
I can update you later.
What is allowed and what's not. It's perception.
So diversity.
We're in a public meeting right now.
Yeah, I'll update you later, Michael.
So language access, Thompson.
DEI on that.
I have a new supervisor at work. We're having a first meeting at 1:30 today, so I have to run off.
Remind me, where are you?
Ecology.
Okay, that's right.
Is
That's
it
right.
measurable?
Stormwater.
Yeah, because we'll have, are we translating?
Getting worried. It's not raining. I don't have a job.
into Japanese and Chinese. because we have fairly-
Yeah,
At least in
okay.
Lakeville, we have a very active Asian.
Oh, we're huge.
Yeah.
We're done.
We're done.
We're just trying to add in the years.
All right, so do you all need a final break or are we good to keep talking until?
I think let's go.
I think
That's
we're good.
Let's muscle on through here.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
everybody?
we're good.
You guys good?
If we need to get up, we can get up in the middle of the meeting.
All right, unless you wanna go grab something to, so. And so telling this group, I need one set of, whoever you think took the best notes over here. If I can have a copy of it, to take with
Definitely
me.
Lisa. Takes the best notes.
Well,
I'll give it to
She
you.
can read mine, she can have mine.
Just before we leave, but, so what I like for each group is to share, obviously, your, objectives. We'll just go through the goals one at a time, and then see if there's discussion and questions, et cetera.
Sarah, please go that direction.
Don't trap me.
You have space?
Yeah.
So, who's gonna be the spokesperson over on this side? Okay,
Hey, you want to go in order?
Doesn't matter. Just tell me which one you're working on, or you're gonna discuss.
Animal care.
Okay,
And we just wanted to make a statement in the beginning that animal care is linked to funding and facilities.
okay,
Okay, and an objective that's early and achievable, hopefully within a year outside too, is in-house spay neuter. And tied to that is in-house medicine.
okay, and that's an objective in and of itself. Does it have your SMART components?
Yes, it's specific, especially the spay neuter. It's measurable because we're able to tell when we're doing it. It's achievable, yes, and the medical care is sort of partly, it's linked to our second objective. And results focused, absolutely, getting the animals adopted faster. And then time bound, yeah, well, 1+ years for the spay neuter and 1 to 5 for the medical.
Okay, and maybe y'all know this better, but I'm a little confused because of if I were doing it, what would the way to look at the SMART is everybody's gonna be clear what they're doing and when they're doing it, and you'll know you've done it. So you're talking about all animals spayed and neutered that are in your care, or what are you talking about?
Having the in-house spay neuter capability.
Just having the capability,
Yes.
not necessarily, okay, gotcha. All right, now I'm clear, thank
And
you.
then having in-house medical care is the longer
Okay,
term, okay? The second one is legislation, which is mainly starting off with a survey of city codes, where they match, where they don't, state law and county laws, to see what we have to work on, what we need to do to achieve objective 1. And it's very specific. It's we're gonna do a survey and look at what we're gonna run up against. Measurable, yes. Achievable, yes. Results focused, yeah. And we said 1 to 2 years, because we gotta get all the jurisdictions to work together to get it. And then somebody has to do a state law survey.
okay,
So that's that one. The second one is in-house behavioral care modification. The first one, part of this is training staff we currently have through continuing education. The second part is hiring for that. And we said training 1 to 2 years and hiring 3 to 5 years. It's results focused, it's achievable, and we're assuming it will impact what the state-of-the-art facility will need to include. So will the medical care and objective 1. And then the last one is staffing to meet the needs of bringing standard of care to the shelter and making sure that we're putting a trajectory of what we're going to need to hire to achieve appropriate animal care, whether it's medical, behavioral, whatever.
okay, so do you all have questions on it, or?
That's a 1 to 5 year kind of, we need to make a plan, what do we need, and then start putting it in the budget.
So basically, you just want to spend all the money that we're over.
We have to.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some
As a matter
very
of fact.
expensive objectives.
Well, we didn't have to worry about funding, guys.
We just said
You guys are doing
it's
that.
tied to you guys.
Except for 3 jurisdictions are on that side.
I got mine to say yes, so.
So
Did I miss
seriously,
anything?
oh.
I think it covered it pretty well.
Okay.
I don't know, questions more so, I don't know, you've outlined kind of 1 year, 5 year objectives. Just thinking to like what is practical in a 1 year period?
Most of ours are more than 1 year. Like, for example, the survey, I'm imagining could take up to 2 years when you got all the different jurisdictions having to dig
And
into the code.
And it depends when we start, kind of a thing.
But you can create milestones that, and that's what I was gonna say, the same thing, is what exactly, what do you want to get done in the year that will
Well, I was
accomplish
thinking
that?
on the survey, for example, if I was the chair of commission, I'd be saying, can I have a 6-month report out from the jurisdictions and where they are and looking at the codes? Can we have a 1 year and a goal of a 1.5 years of a report?
If you were the chair.
If I was the chair.
You do that.
But that, I'm thinking that way. I think staffing, I'd be looking at the executive director going, can you project over the next 1 to 5 years what your staffing needs will be so that we can start looking at the budget as a commission?
And then in turn, I'll look at Andrew and Heather to help.
Yeah, then you pass the buck.
No, I'm just kidding. No, for sure.
And then the same for behavioral, I'd be looking at the staffing, the staff, people like Andrew and Sarah to say, what does this look like? And when can you report out on your achievement on different aspects, starting the training, finishing the training, so forth.
Yeah,
Is that the community stuff too?
Oh, nope.
We haven't got to that one yet.
You guys need to step in and help me with this one. Yeah. I will start it and then I described it, but I relied heavily on their experience. We called it community involvement and community perception. And we link it to the facility and the funding and governance. So that those will be important. The first objective is education. And Carolina very nicely put it in, we need to put these into piles. So the first is staff, educating them on things like behavioral health, but how to communicate with the public as well. And education to that. And then the second pile is education of the commission, especially onboarding new members, but also of our jurisdictions, like, you know, Lacey City Council, the County Commission, Tumwater, and Olympia. And honestly, we probably should put in there the veterinary local profession. Then we have the service clients, animal service clients or customers and their education. And then our next pile is public and potential funding sources. So just general. And then we have the public that like has complaint, you know, they're the complainant. They think that because you leave your dog outside all day, even though there's a water bowl, it's an animal abuse, those kinds of things. So that there's, did I get all the piles?
Yes.
And then do you guys want to expound more on the education?
I think one of the things we looked at with education is that it's hard to just do this in 1 year. So a number of these go from 1 to 5 years. And so you have to narrow it down into coming up with a way to educate staff and councils basically what Jazz Cotton does. And that, and the rest of them, and that could be a simple brochure, what to hand out. It could be report outs at our councils, that kind of thing. And when you talk about education of potential funding sources, that may not be a 1 year thing. I mean, because we're looking at funding those that would tend to fund us. You can't do that in just 1 year, in my opinion. So.
And then the next two kind of answers what she's talking about.
Yeah, so the next one is communication. And
Cynthia, can I add something to education real quick before you?
Yes.
go to the next one? For education, I think the aspect that we got from it, it's ongoing, right? And the reason we kind of put it into steps is like, who do we serve? And, you know, who are the people that go out into the community? And by educating our staff and training our staff and our council members, they're able to get out the information about not only who we are, but also the laws. Especially with the complainants, you know, Andrew was saying, sometimes people don't know. They're thinking, well, my neighbor's dog is barking at it all day. He's a nuisance. You know, I want you to take the dog away. And it's like, well, that's not actually how it works. You have to go through, you know, steps A through B. So I think it's ongoing, and that's why we put the 1 to 5 year training or period timeframe. Just because it's not a thing that you're one and done. It has to be constantly updating, and not only the staff and the commissioners and each of the jurisdictions, but each of just several facets.
Very Yeah, so the second one will feed into objective 1 and 3, which is communications, and that's content, social media, website, media accessible, crisis communication, all that stuff that, any place like an animal service would need. And then I'll just jump to 3 because you can see the difference. Development and marketing team, which will be in charge of fundraising, branding, community events, any capital campaign we might want to do in the next 5 to 10 years. And then feasibility of that capital campaign, which would include public outreach, everything else.
And so when you, there's one more we forgot.
Oh, language access and DEI.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. The other thing about communication and development marketing, it's going to take at least a year to get set up and to outline exactly what needs to be done. Like if it's brochures, what's the first brochure you need to do, or 2 brochures or whatever. Which events to go to this year to do that, and that kind of thing. And obviously the development and marketing team, it'll take at least a year to get set up as a task. Okay, do you want to do that one?
Well,
Or the diversity?
the diversity and equity, yeah, I think those 2 are kind of, well, they're ongoing. We need to start, but they're ongoing and they're gonna grow. The more we grow our funding source, thanks to you guys, we're gonna grow. And this part will help you grow, the funding sources. The language access and DEI absolutely should be part of it. And there are many portions of our community whose English is the second language, and that's a pretty easily, measurable outcome. But diversity and equity is as a long-term, probably a long-term goal that will be continual for years and years to come.
But you also will need, if you're going to reach out to them, you'll need to have to put it on the website in different abilities of languages, as well as do brochures in different languages, common languages, which each year may be 1 or 2 types of things.
Yeah, and to go back to the marketing and development group, I think there was events, making sure we talk about events like Capitol Lake or, Brew Fest or whatever that allows nonprofits to be there. We should be at every place we can. That's how we rebuild our reserves from draining.
Questions or comments or anything from the money side here?
Everybody's looking, so, well, that blew our ideas for funding.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, can we go back and meet about funding?
I'm like, Chris says communication team.
Well, we have to hire staffing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which is more money.
Which is money, okay, guys?
Sorry, we don't have any.
You gotta dream big, that's what strategic planning is about.
Who's gonna be the spokesperson on this side?
We designated Shannon.
So
You designated.
So I've been nominated, and I'll just say a lot of what we went over ties into a lot of the things that you talked about. We've all said this before, this organization, there aren't parts of it that are in a vacuum. They all overlap, they connect. Think about it as a giant Venn diagram, one feeds into the other. So our strategic goal for funding, which we ended up actually taking in the facility planning and infrastructure as well into it, is that Joint Animal Services is a sustainable organization with capacity to grow, and that Joint Animal Services establishes timelines or benchmarks for future assessments as follows. So our objectives are not listed in any particular order. So 1, perform an assessment of current and potential governance structures. 2, increase and diversify revenue streams and leverage new technologies. 3, perform an assessment of current future facility needs, as well as community sentiment and support. And 4, perform program assessments for new programming and current funding, current programming, and then feasibility studies and impacts for sustainable operations moving forward. So as far as the 1-year timelines, we go back to the goal saying we really just want to establish what our benchmarks are. We foresee a lot of the feasibility, and at least in our conversation, being a multi-year effort, 1, 2, 3 years moving forward.
So So a lot of what we were looking at is taking the things that you want to do and look to see if they can be done
Exactly.
and paid for. So that's where that comes, you're the idea people. And so we get your ideas and say, okay, let's look at this in detail and see if it is feasible to do, if it's fundable, if we have funds to do it. So that's kind of how we're tying, the two groups are tying together here is we're looking at it as, how do we accomplish that? And how do we fund it? And how do we get to having a successful activity that you guys are envisioning? It's kind of what we're saying is there needs to be studies over the first year, 2 years. We can't just jump into it. You can't just jump into the things you guys, your suggestions are great, but you can't just jump right into them. So our idea was we need to look at these things in steps, and we have to evaluate each one appropriately and determine if it is feasible, if it's not, is it affordable? How does that fit in with the rest of our things we want to do and their affordability, and to get to this final line.
Yeah, I think that's why this group said 1 to 5 on a lot of this, because we knew that there was gonna have to be an assessment of funding sources. But I would also, put into funding volunteerism, not just to take care of the animals, but you might have a marketing expert out there that's retired that wants to come help with that kind of thing, So that would be the one thing I would put in, is leveraging volunteership to get some of these positions filled.
And did you look at potential funding sources or organizations that could help put together a campaign or anything?
We've got a timeline to look into those things.
No,
So
that
for over
was-
the first year, that's the kind of thing, we don't know what it is right now, right? But in a year, we will know. If we assign staff, we assign somebody to look into those things, within a year, we will know. And once we know that, then we can start moving forward on those. But we kind of looked at this as, in my mind anyway, I don't know about the others, but I kind of looked at this as we're starting at ground zero. We got to figure out what's out there. We got to figure out how our facility and our governance compares to what other people are doing. How way we get funds, how's that compared to what other people are doing? And that's going to take some effort over this first year to get to the bottom line of that. And then once we get to that, then we set objectives at the end of that to move us forward. I was a consultant for 30 years. The last thing you say in a consultant report is there's more study needed. And I'd be happy to do that. So that's what consultants do to keep themselves occupied. So I see that same kind of thing happening here.
One of the things we did not bring up, but it just popped into my mind, is that we talked about showing up at events and being present so people know about us. We did not talk about giving presentations at Rotary or Kiwanis or blah, 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 which I think is rather important, because if you're going to get people interested in giving you money, you have to be where the money is.
And you can get a lot of volunteers from those organizations because
Exactly.
they have a volunteer requirement.
If I can make a comment on this, I think these are all great things, but they're going down way down here.
Yeah.
And those are like specific tasks, but in order, I mean, not only do you have to do what you all are saying, or I shouldn't say you have to, is it a good idea to do what you're all saying is assess, but it's also, then you got to put the plans together. Because just to say I'm going to go do an event may not be the best use of resources. And I can assure you, having been the one responsible for that shelter for a long time, that you need to think about it, those things strategically too. What's going to be the best use of resources, but it goes back to what are you trying to accomplish? So a higher level objective might be that we want to be known by
Exactly.
a certain group of people in a certain way by a certain time. And then you figure out what's your marketing plan to get there. But I know you all, I'm sure, know this, but it just it's easy to start jumping down into the weeds.
Well, it even begins before that. We have to get a really good branding.
Well, exactly. What is your
Before you even
message?
go out, you gotta
Yeah.
get a really
So
good
so
branding.
I would suggest that that you look at that 1 year benchmark, what really is reasonable and you need to get done in that first year to be able to ultimately do these things, which of course they're over time. I mean, you know, and a lot of them are ongoing, but it's like when you start developing a real project plan, you need to say, you know, here are these tasks and here's who's gonna do them and here's when they're gonna do them. So
Yeah.
just an
And to
observation.
beat the branding one, it even impacts how we educate what our websites look like. So it's
Exactly.
almost like that would be a very first step.
So I'd like to make I know we were gonna talk about barriers a little bit, but I think also just the next steps and in thinking this through, it seems like, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to, because it was brought up in our group and we didn't bring it up because we thought that maybe the funding part, but it was in regards to animal care and making sure it's the same service are provided across the country. I think we should add it since they did not add it.
You mean the standardization?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was something that Andrew brought up. So maybe make that our objective 5.
Yeah, standardization, yeah. And I know that Sarah's already begun some of that, but continue that work, I guess. So yes, you're doing good, but keep going.
And add 5 other. Okay, so what I was gonna say is that there's more work obviously needs to be done with this, and there wasn't an expectation that you'd have it all specifically outlined here in this today, but have a good start. And I don't know if you all talked about this, I know Sarah and I didn't, but are you going to, because I know how it is who's gonna do these things, right? These are all great ideas, but somebody has to do them, and it's not necessarily hiring a bunch of staff to do them. So is it this group, does it make sense that maybe you form sub teams or subcommittees to, I don't know how you all function normally, but to work, you know, on maybe, well, you all kind of combined yours, right? So there's 3, you know, high level goals, and that you divide up and to conquer and get some more specifics on the objectives and or not. I'm just putting it out there to think about, or what you guys had in mind.
What, one of the things that we might be able to do, and please, I'm open to suggestions on this, is, you know, once we kind of receive the notes and everything in the summary from this, where we have some of our overarching stuff, we can maybe designate, you know, a small portion of each meeting to finalize some stuff. And we can always, you know, perhaps bring some suggested language with us to the meeting. That way everything's kind of laid out and you get like, so we can basically bring, after she summarizes this, the next meeting, you know, we can bring a summarized of what our suggested language might be for next year's goals with the overarching 5-year strategic plan that summarizes kind of what Diane has written and what we've worked on today. And then you guys can look at that next meeting and say if we got it, if we're off, did we forget something? And that way we can kind of formalize it in that sense of where we want to move forward. And that way we can use that to start building the budget, because we're at budget building time. Does that sound good?
So what I heard was that you would use a small portion of each of your these are monthly meetings, or?
For clarification, our recommendation is going to be that staff take all of the notes back, we'll compile it, we'll come back to this group with what we thought we heard and saw in all of those notes, and then to get additional editing feedback and updates to those draft documents.
Yes.
Staff meeting.
Meaning me and Andrew. No,
Okay.
so we'll take your
Okay.
notes that you provide us.
Yep.
And we'll make sure that those notes still are provided to you guys as well, so that you guys have, you know, something to look back on to remember what we talked about. But staff will bring to the next JASCOM meeting some more formalized recommendations for the strategic plan that's condensed all the notes that we provided you guys. And then you can weigh in yay or nay if we we combined, reduced, summarized successfully for JASCOM. And then choose to adopt said strategic plan.
Very high level there, but I think I captured it. So, okay, so that answered that question. I just want to be sure we have the next step here because I know how that these things go. It's like everyone walks away and then oops. How are we going to keep it moving forward? So you are giving me,
Yes, we have notes from our side that we'll give to you. and
okay,
then
and you guys will give me your notes. Okay, great. So then the final piece here. We'll come back to this, not make the other next steps, but is what can you all do? Especially the non-staff people out here to help break down some of the barriers that exist and certainly were identified, you know, in the weaknesses, maybe, and even in the threats. What are specific things that are particularly, I know, I should quit moving, huh? Moves.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Where did we go? There's our big list over here, our high level list. Particularly, obviously related to those things. What are things, I guess what I was hoping you could get out of here, maybe some things that you all could particularly go away with today and say, look, I'm gonna go individually. I have the authority or I have the influence or something to help break down some of these potential problem areas or threats or weaknesses in order to be that all of this can move forward more easily and hopefully more quickly. So thoughts on that? I'm not as familiar with each of your roles, so it's.
I think like one of the challenges with maybe the organization as a whole being governed by municipalities is for certainly for a certain extent to our city is we kind of expect the services to just happen and then it's like, oh, then it's like really when something breaks down and then doesn't happen, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. Like, I think that our staff are so busy with all the everyday functions of municipal government that, you know, it's sort of like, well, we give money to animal services, they'll go do all the animal problems. And then when we haven't given enough money, so there isn't enough staff to go pick up a deer by the side of the road or to get the barking dog or whatever, then it's like viewed as more of a failure because it's sort of just out of sight, out of mind. I expect it to function perfectly. And then when something doesn't happen because we've provided inadequate resources, then it's like, oh, well, why is this so bad? So I think that there's probably one of the barriers just might be silos between animal services and our municipal partners and our respective jurisdictions.
Such as.
And I think like maybe a good entrance point to that could be maybe on the communication side, like when we do come up with online licensing, maybe the jurisdictions can work together to amplify the availability of that service on their social media platforms. Or we can, you know, we send out mailers to people who are on city water. Maybe we have a flyer that is included the next time we send out a bill. We do that periodically too. Like, I think that there's probably better ways that we could partner to try to break down the silos. So it's less of a, you go take care of the animal thing and more of like a partnership.
And you know, to go to that, I really like where you're going. A lot comes to Olympia, Tumwater. Every year, we should be bringing animal services to present to the council every year. So I think that's because that's when the council doesn't just hear it from me or whoever's sitting here.
Yeah, we've done that. You've been to Tumwater twice, right?
Yeah, I've done that for Lacey and Tumwater.
But we should do like a yearly thing that it's coming.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the exact same thing, and I think part of what I heard from you, Commissioner, was not just waiting for that breakdown, but to also celebrate our successes in what Joint Animal Service is doing for the constituents in each of the jurisdictions.
And telling stories.
Telling stories, yeah.
Those are always better than just,
In addition to having a comprehensive plan with some of the bigger items that are moving forward. with
And I really
animal
like,
services.
something that can go out in the utility bills. because we
Yeah.
all- I think that's a great idea too.
and plus we have Lacy Life, which we can use.
Correct,
And the
and we
Facebook.
already have, and
Yeah.
we're starting to use that, and we are working with the other jurisdictions on getting communication out about Cut Point.
Yeah, and then, yeah, you're blasting out the good news, some good story that goes out on the Facebook of everything.
That's the nice thing about our field. There's not a shortage of stories and everybody connects to them almost. Everybody. It goes across all political, ethnic, whatever boundaries, so.
A cute dog picture.
The what?
A cute dog
Oh,
picture.
oh,
always
totally.
makes
I mean,
me
it's,
feel-
yeah.
Nothing breaks the hearts like seeing a puppy in a cast.
I know, I hate those SPSC things. I just cry.
Sarah McLaughlin in that one picture with people, oh.
For only pennies a day,
Tears in my eyes every time, I
a
turn it on.
latte a
I
week.
can't watch it.
So that's, and that was a great example of exactly what talking about here. So thank you, Michael, for that and all the others that contributed. Are there other things like that that you can think of that either collectively or individually that you could do?
We have a video PSA that got built that hasn't been shown very much like recently. It was a licensing one. It was a policeman from Tumwater, I believe it was. No, it was a policeman from Lacey that was walking up after stopping a car and there was a dog in the driver's seat.
Yes,
Just,
I
let me
remember,
see your license. Don't worry, I'll get you home safely.
I remember, our city manager talks very fondly of this PSA.
Well, the city manager wanted to have the commission members all get on video and talk about what we like and don't like about animal services too. So that never got any further than him.
But some little YouTube kind of thing
Yeah,
could be shared.
that would be something that I think it probably is on YouTube. It'd be nice to get a link to it from.
It'd be
On our
really good to
website.
do it with a video group that makes it funny. Olympia put out a YouTube on how we
It's
do
awfully
the
great.
budget. And they have this Hunger Games scene with the departments of Olympia going after the cash in the middle. And they fight over it. It was hilarious, but that was how Olympia budgets. You could do something funny, not necessarily Hunger Games, but
Is that how
funny.
you guys actually do the budget?
Pretty much no. Jim Cooper, he gets no weapons, we get them all.
So looking at your threats over here, are there other things? I mean, a lot of them are pretty big, like the economy and COVID that are maybe a little more challenging, but
I would say one of the barriers for us moving forward, that until it changes, it's going to remain a barrier, is the county needs to move to full service. No pressure. But it is a tremendous barrier from perception, from serviceability, staffing. It is one of those, and I think we will find that even if when we do some of these assessments for if a new building is feasible and if a community will, can also support it, I think we're going to see pushback from a whole part of the communities that's not receiving services and has, this feeling that they're not, for whatever reason, they're not being provided these services. And why do they need a new building? Why do they need more money? Why are we continually giving them stuff when we're not seeing this? And so I do think that that's gonna continue to be a barrier until
I agree.
we've
by
gotten that.
this
No
you mean.
pressure, Carolina.
No pressure, right? And so I've already spoken with Ramiro on this, about it being my priority, especially for the budget for this year, because it is about perception. And perception in the county is we're not receiving the same services that the city does, which is true, but in part is, because the county cut those services off, and the calls of being, right now they're being bounced to the sheriff's office, which the sheriff's office bounces back to JASCOM. And it honestly ends up hurting that relationship with the sheriff's department too. And so it's
it's really, I've gotten the support from Sheriff Snaza, and he's going to write a letter of support this year to try to get the funding across for it, because it does affect his staff. And so fingers crossed. Good job.
Yeah, I have to admit that I was horrified when the county wasn't putting in that piece. And then, of course, not getting the services, but then that was a real surprise to me.
So am I just understanding this correctly? So it's, you're talking about the people that are in the county, but are not in the three.
The unincorporated
Cities.
Thurston County.
Yeah, okay, which is everything, there's nothing incorporated that's,
There's parts of.
There are some small cities.
oh, there are, okay.
Are not part of we're in our urban growth area, but they're not part of the cities. And there's a fair
Okay,
number
so
of
there's-
people in
all right.
those areas, and they're right next to either Tumwater or Olympia.
Okay, yeah, I just wanna
Lucy,
make
and
sure.
they're mad that they don't have the same services of three
Sure.
streets
You
over.
could literally be, yeah, you could literally be across the street from somebody who they could call about a barking dog and get a response, and then
Gotcha.
the other street.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we have a lot of islands, Tamar in particular.
I think another barrier up there is just plain staffing. Who's gonna do these things that we're coming up and saying we need to have done in order to figure it out? Can the JASCOM staff do it? Do we hire a consultant to manage this whole process? Is there a
Marketing
retired
and
person
development
someplace
team.
that can be doing things? But I think there's we've got all kinds of ideas here. And this is at least the 5th retreat I've been to. And at every one of these retreats, we've had these ideas, but we're still not doing them. And basically the reason we're not doing them is because we don't have someone who can do them.
That goes to funding, actually. I think that's one of the biggest things that, if I was to say we need to work on right off the bat, because all staffing will fall in if we actually have more money and we can hire someone, or at least part-time, get help for you, or hire a consultant. I mean, so in many ways, if we were to put money, I'd be saying the biggest barriers, if we don't figure out our funding, we're not gonna do anything like Doug
Yeah,
said,
that's
period.
However, the one thing we tend to overlook, having been on multiple organizations, is that there's some people that are willing to work for very minimal because they're retired and they love the organization. And I've been on a number of organizations.
You just have to find them.
So I was I think for staffing, I guess like just another part to that is hiring. Right now, hiring is very difficult for several specific positions, especially specialized positions. I know other organizations that I serve on are having issues hiring. I know the county is having issues hiring. So how are we going to get over that barrier? I know, and again, it comes to funding. Looking at incentives to hire people, it's like, okay, well, what kind of incentives can we offer? To hire these specialized positions and make sure that they stay with us.
Yes, that is a very good, especially the tech staff, ed staff, any staff. But I also think that you're right about volunteerism.
Yeah,
I think we need to, I don't know if it's a barrier, but I think that's like I have a client that has said, they're a lawyer, that they'd be willing to work on some of these projects. They're retired, they love animals. You get,
Well, that can be one of it could be an objective of, you're gonna build up your volunteer base to a certain level and with specific types of professional services, not just.
how much is a facility gonna be a barrier? At some point, we'll hit our ability to stay up with standardization, even if because what if we're you put us on a grading scale, are we at C yet?
See, good or bad?
C,
So
70%.
well, I would consider that meeting the bare minimum of standards of care.
So for cats, nowhere near that.
No,
For
dogs we do.
Yeah. That's worse for dogs.
but cats, no.
So I can just see it moving back to funding, you're trying to talk people into it, it's a positive and a negative. If we're not showing that we're actively moving forward, nobody's gonna donate money to a facility that has that standardization, but it's a great rationalization to get money.
Well, that's just what I was gonna say, is that's why I said earlier, if you remember, it's like, you're using, there, parts of this are PR too, that how you frame it and put it out there and get the community behind it, and, you know, you can have a whole, I mean, I've worked in communities that were like, I'm sure, I know I haven't seen your shelter, but it's really bad.
We're not as bad as. some.
Like Atlanta, have you ever been in any of the
Yeah, we're
Fulton
not.
County? Okay, I know the person that runs that. I mean, she's done amazing things with a really bad facility and has gotten the community involved. So, but that you have to, it helps rally the troops, but I think to your point, Lisa, you also have to show you're moving forward. That it's not just, yeah, it's not just
Give us money and it's.
so we can
stay
just
this way.
sustain this bad thing. Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, the whole marketing piece is really critical that you all. So, yes. Let me just check.
I think
the
funding
time.
is its own thing,
Thank you.
honestly. I think it's not just staffing, I think it's a barrier that we have to keep on the table.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed.
Funding.
Oh, yeah. Well, like it came up, well, yeah, I guess it's in two of these and you have a whole,
We have one goal.
a goal around it, right, totally. All right.
We have
Any
20
other-
minutes left.
So anything particular that you guys would like to accomplish in the 20 minutes? That we haven't already, or any?
How do the barriers sort of fit in with the report back and the plan and? Like how do we incorporate those so that we, you know, surmount them?
Well, I think, are you asking me? Are you asking in
No.
general? I have
I
a
don't know, the room, I
a
guess.
couple
We have a
ideas.
couple
Well, no,
ideas.
I think there's a couple different ways. One is I think they should be taken into consideration when you're finalizing your objectives, because I believe that some of these easily become part of that, and maybe even at a lower level of your actual action plans. That's one thing. But the other thing, and the reason why I originally had suggested this be in the agenda is that are there specific things here that you all in your roles could take on to help? And whether it's, I think, Michael, you're the one in the beginning said, you know, that the different jurisdictions could do more communication. So maybe there's with the three, well, I guess there's 4 jurisdictions. So the 3 cities in the county that can specifically take responsibility, not necessarily to do it, but to see that your jurisdiction takes it on and that level, not just at the JASCOM level. So those were the 2 ways I saw that it incorporating, but Sarah, I think you were gonna say something too.
What about, how can we help you, the county?
Public comment. Rally up the troops, because I think that's really what it comes down to. And that's kind of from looking at what went down last year, there wasn't really that demand. And you know, I've been really working behind the scenes trying to make sure that we have, you know, what we need. But you know, Sarah came and made a presentation already, which I'll probably have her back on there to make another one just as a refresher on why we need the services. And we really felt it at the beginning of this year because we had a lot of people calling the commissioner's office where they were upset and demanding why they weren't receiving the same services. But you know, it kind of, people tend to forget as the year goes on. So kind of bringing that back on, especially as we're going through a budget cycle and, you know, making sure this is still a pressing issue. People are still not receiving the same services. So especially like in, you know, I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure if the cities receive the calls, but I know the county does. And I always make sure and tell them that we need it, but it would be great to have Jess come up there again saying, you know, these are the calls we get of frustrated people. And
I know, you know, the sheriff has agreed to write a letter, which I think will really help us get this across the finish line, but just any other support that you can give in regards to rallying up the troops, I would appreciate it.
Would it be beneficial if other, like city officials and council members and other
yes.
commission members from different things? I
Yeah,
know.
that would be great.
Especially if, I don't know what your rules are for public comment, if you're considering something on the agenda, can we speak to it? Some jurisdictions don't, if you could let the commission know.
Or
Yeah,
even
I think our testimony could be relevant in the sense that like Tumwater has a bunch of islands in it that, you know, our officers would otherwise partner on responding to that, you know, we don't because we have islands.
And we have the whole Southeast Olympia unincorporated. That's actually for a number of people.
We do too. So do you document the number of complaints that you call?
Yes. Yeah.
So that is a statistic you could use to say this. And I assume you get some calls. I don't know.
I get some emails about needing to, our phone line does get some calls that we end up sending on down.
But as long as.
Because I don't know where they're from, so I don't know if they're from the county or from one of the cities, so they just say the dog next door is being left out all day, so.
It's helpful to have that documented, that number of calls and emails and stuff, so that.
I can reach out to the OPD. I'm sure that they got shuffled to them if it was in the city thinking it was an animal control thing. I can ask if there's, you know, what they're receiving in terms of numbers for like the Southeast area, thinking that they're in Olympia and they should get the same care.
Yeah, I don't know how many in Tangled Wild and Thompson Place in that area, but I assume that's significant too.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful when we get the report back to know if you see areas where we can do more to be helpful, like if, for instance, in the silos and jurisdictions, whether one of us as a member should pull together the comms directors for each of the jurisdictions to have a meeting about this, or if we determine that in the next year, one of the goals is to get somebody to introduce a bill that would change so that you could microchip in whatever we talked about. I don't know the words. So that you could do the things we talked about that we currently can't do. You know, Lisa and I could talk to Jess about doing that, or like if there's like an articulated way where the opportunities are made task oriented and clear to where we as members on JASCOM could then be leads on individual portions of that. I think that would also be helpful, because like Doug said, you know, we've done the retreats and stuff and it sort of falls into the ether sometimes. And I think that if we have a more articulated set of to-dos for us as members, that it would help ourselves keep us accountable to make sure that we can keep the ball moving forward.
I like it. I like it. And then, and like you said, part of our agenda is maybe being reminded of some of these objectives that we agree short term.
Well, I'm a big project plan person, so I don't, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna jump in there, Commissioner. One of things I'd like to be setting up here in the future, speaking of overseeing a communications department, is quarterly meetings between all the PIOs where we can discuss things like pet points, launching, or anything else Joint Animal Service has coming down the hopper.
That's great.
And Olympia is completely new air communication department right now, so I think you'll find it easy. Just hired 3, we're gonna hire 3 more.
Wow. We have one person.
Well, yeah,
So what I started to say is I like project plans, and I know not everybody does, so I say that with, especially my field, which most people look at me a little weird when I want to do that, but I came from the business world where we didn't have that, and And they don't have to be fancy, and I mean, I'd be happy to give you like a really simple one if that's not something you already do, but it will have, you know, it has a time limit of who's responsible. And usually I divide them up by, I think you all call, you had a word for your areas, but I call them buckets, but you,
We call them buckets.
yeah, so that.
It's too, buckets. of
Yeah,
government.
so, and then that's something that gets reviewed periodically in your meeting, so you're not, I mean, it makes it easier to review, I think, if you have something like that, and not that it can't be adjusted pretty easily.
Sort of instead of reports, maybe, you know, maybe we kind of put it as a strategic plan moment or objective moment.
And I don't know if you all, I'm a Gantt charts, or I like the visual, but I know that's what people don't.
You and my significant other in the camp.
Yeah, well, I like it because I can see what's dependent upon something else, and what is causing us to, you know, be behind, or, you know, I like the visual, but I realize not everybody does, so I have one of those kind of minds. And I like the logical stuff. I used to be a computer programmer too, so if that helps to understand where I come from, but anyway, it doesn't matter what it is, but some tool that allows you all to quickly look at where you
track.
are on what you're trying to accomplish, and helps to kind of hopefully not have this fall into the same trap you all have before. And it's not just you all, it's everybody, you know, we all have a lot of ideas, and then they don't go anywhere because there's nobody staying on top of it. And not that it should all have to necessarily fall on Sarah here, so I'm not suggesting that, but I can provide some tools that would be helpful if it would help you. Move along, okay. Yes.
So just a recommendation, we are about 12 minutes from 1 o'clock, and we do need to transition between meetings on this hybrid system, so I will need to bring John back in here. So my recommendation would be to wrap up this meeting in the next 5 minutes.
I like this recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, because then we can take a little break.
Yes.
It gives us 7.5 minutes for a break. Just how long
Sure
the first
does.
break was.
I just have one, I have one closing thing that will take less than that time that you suggested. And well, actually, I have two things. I just want to go over what the actions are, so we're clear, but also just for your sake, and obviously I love the feedback too, but because you all do this supposedly again annually. Hopefully we don't have more problems that keep you from doing that. So what about this works well and what doesn't, so that you all can continue to improve these sessions in the future with whoever's involved in them. So basically what worked well and what needs more improvement, or needs improvement in general.
And just one thing just occurred to me is, to make this really work, we really have to clearly align our budget to the strategic plan. I mean, that has to be like the buckets, everything has to be.
And are you talking about future strategic planning sessions?
Yeah, well, all the
Diane,
things we
like,
came up.
I was
with
talking about
here.
these sessions.
Yeah, these sessions. So like,
Yeah.
what worked about this? Like,
Having so that, yeah, next
I
year.
liked that we got down to business and we just
Yeah.
dived
that
right
part,
in.
yeah. I absolutely agree. This was really productive. I mean, working through the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and then building our 4 priorities.
I'd say for improvement, like we did a SWAT thing, like, was it 2.5 years ago?
Yeah.
So I think like maybe if we review the past work where we've talked about at the beginning to sort of set the stage for what we've said we wanted to do, and then we can measure whether we've done any of those things, and that can be like a baseline, so.
And metrics.
Yeah, so some kind of review of the.
Was this enough time? Do we need to allocate more time?
I think this was enough time for
What I
this.
can handle.
Yeah.
That's usually most big,
Yeah,
yeah.
you start losing concentration, and you start,
And some of the review
I'm not
might be
opposed to
done
it.
before
I'm
we get
just
here,
asking.
but we could really quickly in the beginning, if we all
Yeah.
look at it. Before we
We
get
could
here,
get
but
it
then really
first.
quickly go through.
Or ahead, yeah.
anything longer, time-wise, though, would be hard, I think. I
Yeah,
just-
no, I think this was really good and it put pressure on us to
Yes.
move through it. Any
All
other
right.
things that would be helpful for next year when we?
Standing
Can
up
we
for-
actually do an annual one?
That is my goal, yes. It just COVID was unkind to all of us as far as
That
that
is-
went.
The other thing, though, meeting in person has been helpful, I think.
Yes.
But we would meet in person probably next year, so it's not exactly an outlier. I mean, it is an outlier.
Yeah, but it is something.
But
to
you
think
recognize
about.
the value of that versus
Yes.
having to
If one of
do
us had
things
been
remotely.
on the video, they wouldn't have had the chance to do much because they probably couldn't have heard a lot of the discussion.
Yeah,
Is this a good time for it? Meaning, does it need to be earlier in the year to get
I would-
things worked in?
I would like to, we were doing it in June, but because of things in COVID, we pushed it, but I'd like to go back to then because of budgets.
Is June the latest? Would you prefer earlier?
Not too much earlier, well, just thinking about the work of all our jurisdictions, but maybe May, June.
Okay.
Because we can
Time for
impact
like-
at least, you guys do biannually, right?
Yeah.
We do yearly. If we do our meetings now and there's gonna be an ask of Olympia, it's easier to put it into the next year's budget if we get it done before the end of June.
Just not April.
Not-
No.
Yeah, somebody has to
You're
get on the
really good.
session.
April's just a bad month.
Right, so the next, just really fast, I will type everything up that I have. Please don't forgive me the 2 sets to leave me your objective sheets. The staff meeting will review and formalize the plan, and according, I think it was Michael's suggestion, to give, hopefully build into that some more clear, specific directions and tasks for the commission. And then you as a collective unit here will review and adopt. And this was just a side note, I'm gonna provide some project planning tools or templates for you. Anything else I missed here on the objectives? In 1 minute?
Good.
Good.
All right, well, thank you very much. I totally appreciate your participation, and you're obviously all very dedicated to the cause, so.
Thank you for your facilitation. and
Yes,
helping
thank you.
us.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
My pleasure, totally. Yes.